settle down, listen to conversations that have taken place over the last couple weeks, and reorganize our thoughts and look at a couple different options from both configurations as well as financial implications. So Jennifer, you'll take it from there. Did we motion to come out?
Yes, they did.
Yes. Okay. So thank you for your patience.
Okay, so we're done with executive sessions.
In your packet and also available online is superintendent's report. Enrollment as of January 7th is 1,020 students in our district. There is, for your review, some financials around the pre-K program in this report, along with a financial review of food service. Very preliminary at this point because the program's been up and running for about 4 months now. One of the things that I think is helpful, just as a Reader's Digest version, is that we had budgeted a line item of about $200,000 for the food service, and we're coming in around 160 if current numbers hold. So we extrapolate over the course of the year. Again, very, very early, but some detail is available to you within that report. I know Bryce had mentioned that we had our 3rd strategic planning design team last Friday. The writing team got some really great feedback from participants, and so we felt like we needed to really go back and make some adjustments based on that feedback. So we've made the determination to hold a 4th meeting with that design team to see if the adjustments that we're making seem to be on track. Just a couple of highlights. This actually right now as we speak, we've got a team out in Cambridge, Mass. That's doing some training on collaborative problem solving with students, and we have representatives, I believe, from every school in the district. Is that correct, Shari? So that is continuing this week. What you will also find here, if you link on here, is just the latest in terms of how we're doing with engineers and having different people come in for Prosper Valley, so that's included in your report. And then another piece that I think it is helpful for people to be aware of, we currently have a SIS system, student information system, that is run by Rediker. We have not been happy with the what that software is offering us. So we are in the process of looking at replacing our SIS system for next year. And we are currently looking at 2. One is called PowerSchool and one is called Alma. So we are in the process of doing that. One of the things that we're, from a very pragmatic level for parents and community, when you go to enroll your child in school and you fill out that paperwork 16 times, when you get a higher functioning SIS system, we very likely will be able to do something where you fill it out once on your phone and you're done. Yahoo is right?
So I have a question to that.
Yep.
2 years ago, we sat in an SU meeting, and we were told that when we upgraded our system for a $50,000 at SU to go to whatever last year's grading system was, one of the reasons was because everyone could just put it once over in elementary school and it would get carried over all the way through. That's what we were told. And that's what you just said as a selling point.
Who uses this, an SIS system?
So
it's not for grades?
The SIS system shows up in a lot of different ways. It shows up in terms of registering students. It is integrated in, for example, in the snow calls. So we'll often have people say, I gave you my email, I gave you my phone, but it doesn't go all the way through. So it's our emergency contact information. It can be used for grading. It doesn't have to be used for grading, but it can be used for grading. The reports to the state around different types of demographic information that we're required to send. So any information related to student information, that's what an SIS system captures.
So is Rediker, I know that's what comes up when you pull up Plus Portal. Right. So that's like replacing Plus Portal?
The Rediker, right, that is operating.
Understand, Jim, I think that it's 2 different things, but understand Jim's frustration because we're like, right now, middle school and high school parents may have to, depending on if their children are taking some proficiency classes and some non have to look both places for their grades. They have to look at plus portals and jump rope. So this is getting rid of jump rope or plus portals. And that,
So jump
Karen,
rope
I mean,
is
maybe you can.
Well, but before Garen gets into it, my frustration is not yet on, I mean, my frustration has been about proficiency for a while. My frustration here right now today is listening to, 2 years ago, we had Ralph in front of us and said, anyone that was on the old board, we were basically told that we were going to this new system, okay, through plus portals. It was all tested out. We were going to spend $50,000 for it, and we were going to be able to, for once and all, that when you entered in elementary school, all the kids' information and all the tracking and everything, it would then even come over to the high school. We were told it was 50 grand. I asked if we can get a copy of the software prior to getting it, and I was told that day in a meeting that it was in beta form, and they still hadn't had it read. And I had said, really, we're going to invest 50 grand into a beta program that's not ready yet. And that's what was done. And now today I'm telling us that the 50 grand we invested 2 years ago, we need to go to another SIS system. And one of the selling points is because we could carry all the information forward. That's what we were told.
Just a couple of different responses. So SIS systems have an annual cost to them, so year after year. And one of the things that has played out with Redecor is that we believe that they have not held up to their end of the contract, and so we will not be paying them for their third year of the contract. And looking at what these other programs can offer. And what is critical about these programs is that they're a K-12 program, so that the data of the student travels with the student from the time they enroll in pre-K or K all the way up to the high school level.
Once again, that's what we were told with bus portals. We were also told it was a $50,000 fee that 1 year, and we were also told that each year after that was a charge. So we paid 50 grand for plus portals. What did we pay for jump rope? And now we're even talking, I mean, I think I said enough.
Can I get a sense of what that annual cost is? Or, the range, when you say there are annual costs associated with these? I mean, it's not 50,000, right?
It's not 50,000, but I can get you that answer, Pam. I'm afraid that if I pull it off the top of my head, I'm not going to give accurate information. So I really feel like I would want to come back to you.
Yeah, I just think it would be good to know for us to be able to evaluate.
Can we have Raph come to our next meeting and just do a full presentation on, what had we invested in, where are we now, and why are we investing in a new program? Why don't we just have him come and talk it through with us and involve the costs that are involved from when we first initially, I think it was a middle school, high school board, or was it the SU, Jim?
It was at the SU meeting, but it was basically saying that we were going to change the plus portal, and it would help us when we came into a whole mud or
Correct.
at the time we were expecting. Because then you can take to the elementary schools, you were there, Tim, and then it would work out that all the information we tell them, we would only have to do it once.
Yeah. So let's get clarification on this entire process and where we are to date with the financials of it as well before we commit to reinvesting in something again. We gotta be tighter with this one. Any other questions?
No, and I think just the other thing that you've got here upcoming in district events, just a reminder that the district budget information meeting is scheduled for February 25th. Town meeting and voting day is March 5th. And the annual meeting and board meeting of the merged board is scheduled for March 11th.
Jennifer, you can continue.
Next, we have the consent agenda. Need a motion to approve the minutes of December 10th, minutes of December 17th, to accept retirements. Everybody has this in their packets. And to accept endowment grants. There are 2 of them now.
You want a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor of
consent? Everybody okay with it?
Okay. update on the Barnard merger and WCSU vote. So it looks like we've had some
So that's,
communication
yeah, that's
with the
been
lawyer.
a moving target. I'll jump in here, Paige, and then I'll let you also jump in. But I had received a communication from our attorney concerned about the decision the board had made around not going through a 721 process with Barnard around coming on. And he had expressed that the way that the state statute is written under a situation like that, it would result in the merge board having 3 votes, Barnard having 3 votes, and Pittsfield having 1 vote at the SU level. However, thank you to Matt, who sent along a communication indicating that when this Act 46 committee came together, they actually wrote very specific language regarding that, so that each member of this board has a single vote, and then Barnard Academy's board also appoint somebody, and at their last meeting, Bryce was the lucky winner, so he is also representing Barnard Academy, and together Bryce's 2 votes and Pam's 1 vote get melded into 2 votes in this process. So what at the time appeared to be a fairly significant concern, and Stephen emailed this to Paige, and Paige had said they wanted to bring it to the board, this kind of got sorted out, so it is really pretty much of a non-issue, but we did want to at least explain that to everybody in terms of how we got there.
And just FYI, based on our vote that we had in our last meeting with Barnard, regarding Barnard, Corinne the chair of the Barnard Academy, has reached out to Jennifer and I to set up a meeting so that we could set up a calendar on kind of what our goals are for them as a town in presenting that vote to their town as well. So I believe Bryce, Corinne, Jennifer, and I are going to get together and work on that calendar or schedule, and then Jim and Pamela and their group is working on the policy for
Well, that's going to be after this next.
correct. Yep.
We have a meeting on the 16th, and then we'll set the schedule for that.
Yep. Okay. Cool.
Okay. Next, an update on the Reading meeting that was held last week.
And so in your packet, what you have is a memo outlining kind of the steps that occurred in order for the meeting to take place, then a summary of the meeting notes, and themes of concerns that were heard at the meeting. A number of those were echoed here this evening, indicating to you that there was a request that the board reconsider that decision, and kind of outlining, if the board does decide to go forward, next steps based on the concerns that were heard from the
So we can start discussion. I'll make a motion that the board stays with the decision that they made at the last discussion of this.
Do I have a second? Okay. So just to let you know, Patty, Adam, Tim, and myself attended the meeting. Mary Beth, John Hansen, and Maggie Mills were the group that sat in front of the Reading parents and community members to answer questions. Our representatives, Allison Clarkson and Charlie Kimball, were also present at the meeting as well. I think that, in all honesty, Mary Beth and Maggie and John did a good job in answering the initial questions written down. I left the meeting feeling like the parents had not had all their answers to their questions given. I think there were a lot of unopened subjects that were left unopened, and a lot of that has to do with contracts and employment as well, that couldn't be discussed in detail. I felt like the parents are very concerned. They're a little bit scared of the unknown. They would like a plan written out so that they have something cohesive to put in hand so that they can back it up, either 100% or not. And these are just my personal impressions. I think that when we look at combining any students into any new school, we have to start thinking about that being a new community, not just a school in a town called Woodstock or Reading. And I'll share a story with you that was shared with me about a student from Pomfret School who is now attending the Woodstock Elementary School. And her mother said to her, I want you to know that the Pomfret School is not going to reopen next year. And the child's reaction was, well, then I'm not going to school if I can't go back to my own school. And the mom said, well, we're going to have to work on that a little bit because that's the decision that's been made because the school can't be open next year. So the little girl thought about this and came back to her mom after school the next day, and she said, I have an idea. Mom said, what? She goes, we renamed the school the Redwood Valley School. And her mom said, the Redwood Valley School? How do we rename it the Redwood Valley School? She said, Red for Reading, Wood for Woodstock, and Valley for Prosper Valley. Out of the mouth of the babes. How simple can that be to be a great answer to then reinvesting in our kids, but also reimagining a whole new community that's not just Woodstock, it's not just Bridgewater, it's not just Reading, and it's not just Pomfret. It's now the Redwood Valley School, which I totally love the idea. I'm probably damned if I do and damned if I don't, but I do want to share a little history with all of you. Jennifer and I have been on this board for the last 15 plus years, and we've seen a lot of changes. We've seen a lot of suggestions from the state level. We've gone through REDS, we've gone through God only knows what other suggested reconfigurations to get us to be a whole. And the first 2 times it failed miserably. And this is the 3rd time that the state has wanted us to join as one district so that we didn't have individual boards. But in my experience sitting on the Woodstock Elementary School board, when I first came as a new board member, Reading had just finished their first conversation of closing their school down and moving to Woodstock. And they suggested it and approached the board of Woodstock to do so. The conversation took about a year, and it went to the town, and they voted no on it.
Which town?
Excuse me?
Which town voted no?
Reading did. They weren't ready to close their school. It was too valuable to them, and they just couldn't imagine not having that school in that town. 5 years later, when Christine Coriolita and myself sat on the board, we were approached by John Fike and Justin Sluka to once again close the school down and come to, and you can shake your heads, but it's the God's honest truth.
It didn't happen that way.
It did happen that way, and we worked on a contract for a year. And John Fike went back to the town and presented it, and you said no. And that's okay with us. But I want you to know that those conversations have taken place. And the results weren't what anybody who were at that table working on that contract, what we expected, and that's okay with us too. But those conversations have taken place. Jennifer sat on the consolidation committee for how many
51
months?
meetings.
51 meetings. It's a long time. And obviously you've seen what the model was suggested, which in the Articles of Agreement suggests a 5 through 6 coming to Woodstock. I listened to a gentleman at your meeting who said, I voted yes the 2nd and 3rd time of the votes, because you had 3 votes. I voted, though, on the premise that only 5-6 would be moved, because that's what was in the Articles of Agreement. I don't necessarily personally disagree with him, I'll be honest. And that's why we're having this conversation tonight, because I've also been approached by Allison Clarkson, who called me yesterday and spent 2 hours with me on the telephone talking about the pros and cons of moving 5-6 versus 4-5 and 6. And Charlie Kimball, who I spoke to twice over the last week about the same subject matter, as well as you sending a letter to us asking to reconsider our thought process. So I'm, as chair, responsible to bring those conversations to the full board, because it was the full board that took the vote. They took the vote based on the recommendation of our educators. Whether or not we support that or not, the vote was 1-2, I don't know what it was because I don't vote. 13, thank you. So it's with the pleasure of the board to decide if they want to further the conversation and reconsider their vote. And I have to leave it up to them to have that conversation, to be quite honest with you. But I wanted to give you my perspective in what I heard, what I saw. And this is tough stuff. I'm not going to deny it. And it's not fun. And I spend a lot of hours at the SU office talking things through over and over and over again to hopefully make sure that we all are as well informed as possible as board members to make the best decision we possibly can in the best interest of our kids and their education. So I will leave it at that, and you as board members can discuss the possibilities.
I guess I'd be curious to know if people have questions that were not at that meeting, because I think Mary Beth did her best to convey that was supposed to happen, the sentiment of what happened in that meeting and the emotion in the room, but I don't think you can truly replicate what, the sentiment and the messages that were conveyed in that room.
So I don't have any questions about that meeting, but I would like to throw in a little shorter history that just started about a year ago. We had many discussions about 6th grade moving over at one point. I was not for it. I said I didn't like either vote, but it was a board discussion, and I lost. I said we should have kept 6th grade over there this past year or the next year. But it's a board decision, and the board was given a bunch of information. Don't jump to conclusions that you like me because of that statement right there, okay? On this discussion.
We're in danger of that.
Just on this, I'm saying just on this discussion. But the board had a discussion. We had multiple discussions. We talked about 5th and 6th. We talked about 4th, 5th, and 6th. Reading came to a board meeting. Reading said, hey, if you just give us some notice, then we're okay if you did 5th and 6th or 4th and 5th and 6th, or you moved them or whatever. That was the discussion. And I specifically said, if we're going to make a move, let's get it done earlier than June like last year. So we moved forward, and it's a lot sooner than that. I get where your town is coming from. I truly get it. And this board made a decision based on stuff that was given to us. And like I said, I lost. I was ready to wait for the 4 years for where Act 46 says you should start talking about some of this stuff. But it was in the Articles of Agreement. And all I can do is for people like you that are out there from Reading is saying that this board made a vote. And if it stays to that vote, I reached out to my representative in our town, because basically really Killington belongs to Rutland County. We are not Windsor. So Bridgewater and Killington belong to the other side. So the Vermont Statutes Online states, Title 16, Chapter 011, and I'll give this, who's really in charge of this lead or whatever, because I only have one copy. Withdrawal from a dissolution of a unified union school district. A town or city corresponding to a pre-existing school district that voted to form a unified union school district may vote to withdraw from the district if 1 year has elapsed since a unified union school district became a body politic and corporate as provided under section 706G. I could go on and on and on, but it basically says that you folks, if you really don't want to be in this district and you really want to keep your school and go the way that you want to go, you need to have a town vote. And that town vote will say that you want to be on your own and you would like to withdraw from this district. Upon that, if your whole town votes yes, okay, because I see about 50 people, and I know there's more than 50 in Reading. Okay, I hope so. Okay, but you can have your vote, and if your vote says you will vote to stay on your own and you don't want to be in this district, then it has to go to a full board, a full town vote. And I will tell you, as a person, just like with Barnard, I'm not going to stop what you want to do. Okay, so if you come back with a vote and say you want to keep your school and you want out of our district, here's the piece of paper to whoever's leading the charge, and I will make sure in the town of Killington that everybody votes to accept your decision.
So Jim, can I just interject here? I think you're jumping to an extreme. I think it's fair to say, and I speak on behalf of the whole town of Reading, that people don't want to be part of this district. One of the big things they want is equity, and this doesn't feel like it was a very equitable decision in terms of taking grades 4, 5, and 6 so early in this process with a lot of balls in the air at the same time, right? Without all the details having been thought out. And a lot of the concerns that were raised at this meeting are legitimate concerns of what happens to after-school programming, what's going to happen to the busing, what's going to happen when parents apply for school choice because they don't want to go make 2 different trips. And we're not in a small suburb or an urban area where schools are 1 mile from each other. We're talking about 45 minutes to an hour, like Nick so articulately said. This is not reasonable in these towns that are glommed together in a district. And I've been saying this all along, we're moving way too fast. There's a lot of things that are in the air, and yes, I understand the budgetary constraints. I understand that this is what needs to happen based on the small size of Reading, right? And the small amount of students we have in a school. But at the same time, we're talking about really building up a district, right? And making it a solid district from pre-K all the way through 12. And factoring in things like what happens to a community when you start whittling away at a school, right? And I know I don't mean it in a diminutive term like you've talked about in the past, Justin, but all we have to do is look at Plymouth. How many young families move to Plymouth just so they can send their kids to Woodstock or Killington or Prosper Valley? We have to find ways to really build up communities, and this does not feel like it's a good start in the right direction. Because what you saw and what you heard in that meeting is families are leaving. They're talking about leaving. They don't want to be here. You think families are going to move to the town just when there's pre-K through 3? And that's the legitimate concerns that people are sitting with. And I think that warrants for everybody to think about. They're asking for people to slow down, take a step back, rescind that vote. And I know you don't want to hear that. I know people are tired of talking about it, but this is authentic.
I don't want to hear it. It's that this board had a year's worth of discussions, okay? It had a year's worth of discussions. It had multiple people coming in. I've basically sat here and said that I was against, and I voted against what was happening at that time. What you're saying to me is equity, so then let's go look at the budget, and it will show you, okay, you want to talk about equity. In the town of Reading, if we're just going to stick to facts, in the elementary school, the cost per child is over $18,000. It's actually more than the high school, okay? In Killington at Woodstock Elementary School, it's $15,000, just about $15K. So now do I get all the people in the town of Killington to come forward and say, hey, listen, I want equity. Reading's getting $18,000 a kid. I want $18,000 a kid. All I'm doing here right now is saying that this board made a decision based on facts, okay? And we came up with this move. There was a vote. And now because someone doesn't like it, we've been having multiple meetings, and I am just giving it out. If you like it, if you want to continue that talk, and I'm a firm believer And I've been brought up since I was like 10 years old. The minority is always heard. So what I'm doing is saying, if you want, have a vote. And I would like to see if that's the minority or the majority that's coming to these meetings. There was a vote, and there was talk about 5th and 6th, or 4th, 5th, and 6th moving over to Woodstock at one point. We became a board. I argued not to do it. I lost. Now I'm just giving you another way of, if you really believe in your town school, to have a vote in your school, and then if that's what you want, I will go out to all the people in my town and say, we should back what that town wants. Exactly like when we had a vote about Barnard, and there was a vote coming up here saying we should accept that. Matt and I stood up and said, we should not do that. If Barnard wants to fight, then let Barnard fight. All I'm saying is that this board made a vote, and if it sticks to it, you have another option. That's all I'm saying.
To me, it's just semantics. I don't think it's about fight. I think it's about compromising, finding ways to work together. And what you're jumping to is, if you don't like it, leave.
I guess I would, there's been zero compromise from your side, honestly. Like, we had an agreement in Act 46 for 5th and 6th. We tried to move actually just one grade, and we had a parade. We voted on Act 46. It was in the agreement. So that was plenty, like you knew in advance, we would discuss it. We tried to move one grade, which we rescinded our decision because of pushback. And we said we would do a restructuring plan in the fall, and we did that, and we voted on it. Honestly, Reading is filibustering this board. Like almost every meeting, we talk about 15 kids moving up the road.
That's a democracy, man.
Right? While in our high school, less than half the kids are proficient in math. Like, guys, we're not focusing on the right stuff, okay? And so I guess I'm totally with Jim. I actually totally get Reading's perspective, right? Which is, you want to be able to control your own school. I get it. But the state has kind of stacked the cards against you. Like, you don't pay for your own school because of Act 60. Act 46 put you in this board because of an extra 10 votes in your town. There is an option for you to get out of this board. You don't have to be controlled by it. You can control your own destiny. But we have to make decisions for all 1,000 kids in this district, not just for 10, okay? And it's not like those kids aren't being educated, right? Prosper lost their school this year, right? They came to one meeting, they said their piece, they're working with us. Bridgewater closed their school when they're the exact same size as you guys. They closed their school, right? They're not coming every single meeting to ask us to reopen. Plymouth, no school. Pittsfield, no school, choice, right? Not everybody has a school building. We have to be able to think about the resources we have and how to spread them equitably. You're always talking about equity. I'm looking at the budget now. 18 grand a kid for Reading. In the Redwood Valley School, 13,889, right? So where is the equity? You tell me where the equity is, right? You have a student-teacher ratio that is much lower in Reading than it is in the Redwood Valley School. Where is the equity, right? We could go on like this forever, okay? We've made a decision. I recommend the board stick with its previous decision.
And they have an option if they do not.
And Reading has a choice.
Would you tell all the people in Woodstock to honor their vote? Yeah. That's all I'm coming from. I get where you're coming from. I understand it.
I guess I struggle, Matt, with that response of it's basically saying stop coming and stop representing yourselves. That's what you just said. And that's discouraging.
No, I mean, we have to get on with the business of the board.
I understand that, but that's part of being a public board is communities and coming together as a unified district. And this is just year 2. And you're basically saying to people, don't come and speak up. And that's
totally
really discouraging.
Come and speak up, but this will be, I think, the 4th vote on some grades at Reading, okay? We cannot have these votes, 3 or 4 times a year. We've had 0 votes on a massive math improvement plan in the high school? Zero, right? You've had many votes on, do we work to move 5th grade or 6th grade or 4th, 5th, and 6th grade? Like, we got to focus on the big stuff.
Thank you. Thanks, Mom, for the big stuff. Wow.
So our kids are just not important.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good to know.
You
Any
got
other comment?
So, you know, I don't think there's anything more difficult than potentially closing a school in a community. I mean, it means so much to communities. The difficulty we face is a financial one, and it's the state. It's also us. I mean, let's be honest. Walk through the halls of the school. Tell me how many people are moving to come here, right? There's not been a reinvestment here. How long? Long time. We're not getting great results. There's nobody looking saying, God, I gotta be in Woodstock. It's an education destination. It's great to live there, and my kids need that education.
Nobody moving to Vermont.
That's a point too. Although, you know what? Other places would beg to differ, right? But Woodstock certainly wouldn't. I think there's good things happening here. I think there's good teachers. But if you look at the overall, it's not that good. It's not something that's going to attract people. And until this building and this education institution right here attracts people, the feeder schools are all going to suffer. This is not going to end. You're just the beginning. I mean, you're really the third, right? But it's not going to end. We can all show up to meeting after meeting. And until this changes, nothing else changes. We can all hate it. There's not a person on this board that likes it. You can be mad at the board members, but not one person given better options would close Reading. They would keep it open and they would invest in it. Look at our budget. We have a terrible budget. It's terrible. I'll be perfectly frank. I moved here 5 years ago. I wouldn't do it again. My wife grew up here. I work in education, started a company in it. Probably see more schools than everybody in this room combined. I wouldn't come back. And it's the problem of the finances from the state, which have not been addressed with our representatives. Let's be fair there as well. When we give away half the money we raise, and yet we have no benefit of scale, let's have that conversation. When all we're doing is fighting about keeping buildings open, when kids are failing in math, your kids come to me someday to get a job from me, they're not getting one. They can't do math. I hire developers. Maybe the conversation does need to move on. This is frustrating. And I get both sides. Closing a school or taking grades away in the school is nothing more painful. But until this building is great, until we talk about this building being great, nothing else is going to be. This is the draw. What high school are your kids going to graduate from? Where are they going to go to college? What are they going to do next? I would suggest we all get on board with that conversation, and we do not reopen this vote right now. I hope that changes someday. I hope someday we have such a good school here in such a good situation that we have to open elementaries. We have to invest in elementaries because people are moving in to be there. It's not fair to Reading. It's not fair to the kids at West. It's just not a fair situation. So let's talk about some solutions that move us forward. Let's move past this issue and get on to the next thing. Because until we get there, nobody is going to succeed. That's my piece.
If I was in the audience,
Anybody else want to?
I would only add that when the mold clears at the Prosper Valley School,
water damage.
we're in the very same conversation. So in terms of enrollment decline, Reading's not alone. And that's a painful conversation in the town of Pomfret. But we're there. So I just, I don't think Reading's completely alone in conversations that are going to come.
Can I just add as a non-elementary voting member of this board, but we do have the other committees we referenced earlier. We have the, I don't know what we're calling it, Campus Configuration Committee that's just barely starting. It does have a couple Reading members on it. It does not have members from every town, but there is some people from Reading that stepped forward that are going to be on it, which I think is great. And that's going to be a lot of the time where we take the profile of the graduate and the information from the strategic planning, which has been community members, which has been students, teachers, administration, board members these last two years, really. And it's all kind of coming together to this. And that's going to be where we have a lot of conversations about some of what's being discussed tonight, about Prosper Valley, about, the buildings and, everything that comes along with it. And I just wanted to share that I think what's nice for those of you that can see the documents, that a lot of the conversation has really been steered towards students and being really student-centric. And that's a focus of our committee and our task. Which I think is at least a common thread and something we can all agree on, and what different people are referencing, even though there's different opinions of how to go about that. So I encourage anybody here to chime into that committee as well, because we're going to be doing a lot of work these next few months.
My name's Roger Rivera. I used to sit on I'm from Killington, and I sat on the high school, middle school board here for 9 years. My daughter is currently a senior in college, so I spent a lot of time here. And when I started on this board, it was a good school on the way to being a great school. Greg Schillinger, when he was principal, used to come to us annually and tell us that we were on like the Forbes top 1,000 schools in this country. So I try very hard in my time on this board to continue to preserve that reputation of this high school. It was an uphill battle, so I hope that you guys understand that it's been there and it can be what you hope to achieve. And I'd love to see it again.
Once you left, we fell off.
I don't know where it stopped.
Okay, we have the ongoing effect of, remind me here, because I've been here that long, Act 90, right? 60, I'm sorry, Act 60, yeah. My acts get confused sometimes.
Okay.
But this is like a degrading effect that's happened over the long term, right? You want to complain to somebody? Get in the ear of your representatives and don't stop. And I like them all. But they need to hear this. And I realize that gold towns in this state are not necessarily going to win that fight, but boy, we're not even fighting it. And so all the time, we have this really small school with no benefit of scale and a very difficult position to reinvest to become great. I think Garen and his staff are doing a lot with a little sometimes. I mean, and there's still money. There's still things going on. My kids are going. I've got 5 kids in the school, 1 in high school now, 4 in it. I still think they're getting a good education. But if you look at the numbers across the board and you walk through the hallways, it's a different situation. Mm-hmm. Boy, it's time we stop kidding ourselves on that and stop worrying about the little things that get to the big things.
Yeah.
I'd like to call the question if nobody else has anything else to put in.
Sure.
I think there was a hand over here, so I'm not shutting down.
I didn't see a hand.
Oh, okay, I thought I saw a hand. It might have been.
Remind me of the question.
The question is for us to, Randy, you have the motion?
Motion to stay with the December board decision about restructuring Reading. I did not hear a second.
He seconds it.
Okay.
Jennifer seconds.
So a yay would mean status quo.
Correct.
No would mean
To revote.
to revote.
All those in favor of the motion on the table, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Okay, motion has it.
And there's 2 members that were not voters on that, right?
Right.
Correct.
So whoever's here, subtract 3 people. 3?
Yeah, and I'm going to.
So 3 members out of here cannot vote.
Just raise your hands if you said yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And 1 no.
I guess I would just make a request. I mean, again, listening to the messages that were conveyed in that meeting that had to be requested by the community, that there be some serious effort put into how you're going to honor this transition for the community and the school. Because I think that was one big takeaway, was there's a lot of details that are not answered, and a lot of serious concerns about the transportation piece, about the after-schooling piece, about the equity piece that I think does warrant a lot of attention and a lot of effort.
And Adam, if I can echo that. I think that there were good questions raised that we will be looking into. Part of the hope was a conversation about what are the critical things that are important to the community that we're mindful of in our planning. And so that certainly we did take good notes around that, and we will look into viability wherever possible with those things. There are some challenges with it, and so I can't guarantee that we'll be able to do everything that the community would want, but we will certainly look and wherever viable, address the concerns that are raised and come to a place where you will have a written documentation in terms of the transition steps. But one of the things, it will need some time to build that out, and if you're, just kind of thinking about when children transition to the middle school, high school, typically you're not getting information in December about what that will look like, and we needed to hear more from you about what are the critical issues. But one of the things that I would say is that we would, definitely look to have a ongoing written communications, and as we get on closer to the end of the school year, having some face-to-face with principals to go over the details of any transition. But I think that was heard and understood, and something that we will do our best to address.
And I think it's imperative that John and Maggie work with the parents and the children to establish that new community that's going to be established in both areas. I'd like to see them in charge of it. Because they're going to be the boots on the ground at both facilities, and they're going to be the faces that the children are going to recognize the most. So I will put them at the lead of this. I think they really need to create one kick-ass primary school that better become like the IT school for the state of Vermont on what a primary school is all about. And I'm not kidding you, I'm being serious about it. And then 2, creating a really fabulous new community in Woodstock that is just not center focused on Woodstock only, but all of the towns that are creating this new community. It is imperative that we do that, and that we support those changes, or else, in my opinion, then I think we've failed.
And I would just like to say by February, since this is January, the items that Reading has put forward to us, such as transportation and everything else, that we at least see here at the board, a scheduled when you think those deadlines for those questions could be answered.
And I need to have added to that is I'd like to see a policy about school choice, because as it was brought up, it's going to be really subjective.
But that is one of the things that's on the letter that came.
It's a huge piece.
And I'm asking for those answers, at least the deadline that you can expect, that Reading parents can expect those questions that they have to be answered.
And one of the things just in the memo is that, if the board decided to go forward, what we would recommend is that there's a communication out in February around the administrative structure of Reading Elementary School, viability of adjusting the RES early start time due to busing issues, and offering after-school programming, school choice and planned transition activities for Reading Elementary Schools in April, a report. And then in final staffing of our Reading Elementary School and final staffing at West, grades 4 through 6, and classroom assignments are done at the beginning of June. So
and all I'm asking for is that to be in written form for all board members at the next meeting and out to the public. You're reading it off now. I just would like it in the next meeting.
And just the timeline of how we'll go about it.
That's all. And that way we can hand it over to the Reading reps here, and they have the answers to the. Not the answers, but they have when they can expect to have an answer.
Okay. Richard? We're up for budget. Do you have handouts here?
Just, but this is the, just
Does anybody in the audience want a copy of this? My hand is over to the other side.
Okay, so this is, so this is for feedback. This is, so we still don't have the cost per.
Yep, no, they're right here, cost per.
Oh, this one, okay. And as Paige said earlier, we've had several budget meetings since we last met, but we really want some direction as a full board as to where we want this. When we left last time, we really said we want to come back with a level funded budget, show us what that means, or show us what that would look like, what we'd have to, what compromises we'd have to make, what positions we'd have to take out. This from Richard shows, you know, I mean, well, you can see it. It's very big buckets. Shows the projected average class sizes. So, I mean, help me, Richard. Where are you?
Right over there.
Okay. So, you know, help us to go through this. Where is the? I mean, our budget last year was 17,870, and the projected is 18,1.
Yep,
So this is not level funded.
that is absolutely true.
Well, so once again, like one of the questions I've asked, and now that I'm looking at this, so it's showing in here the district-wide, so one of my questions was moving money
Yeah.
from one place to the other. One of the questions on the finance committee after we had our last meeting is when this board says level fund a budget, what does that mean to each one of you? Some of it may mean that we stay at 17,870,000 and whatever. To me, level funding a budget would mean keeping the tax rate at the same rate. And the reason why I say that is because the state has given a cost per student higher, Richard, than the previous year, correct?
They provided a higher yield.
A higher yield to offset because they knew that there should be around an increase in everyone's budget of 2.5%?
The estimate is in the range of 2.5, but the yield is based on how much money is available from the education spending fund.
Okay.
Correct.
So the state at this point is saying that they're giving us a yield cost per child of 2.5% in that area of an increase.
Go ahead.
I mean, it's a dollar increase they give us.
Okay,
It's not
a dollar
percentage.
each. This increase that we have in front of us, on one hand, is only
1.3.
1.3. So the question being is, are we looking at as a board to keep it funded to a tax rate or to a dollar rate when we give direction? And saying that also, you know, just by saying, to me, if we're going to keep either way, I still want to see what we're losing and what we're gaining. And what we're losing has to make sense that we're actually losing it to take something else to gain. So just because I'm saying level funded to a tax rate, I still want to have those choices of
Yeah.
certain things.
Well, and then, you know, on the second to last page at the bottom, so this would be the tax rate in the different towns with the budget as presented.
So I guess, I mean, just in general, I like to look at things as dollars. So I agree with what you're saying about the tax rate, but if it was for me, I'd want to see things in like pre-yield, pre-CLA form, you know, because those things go up and down without anybody in here's controller without, poor Darren or Mary Beth, that's just going to happen from town to town, and it varies. So I think it's hard to, I think it can get pretty confusing when you start saying by tax rate, because it is different from town to town, and the CLA is going to go up and down. I mean, Barnard's getting slammed this year, but when I look at dollars, I feel like it's a lot easier to compare apples to apples. You can question things a little bit easier because of that more obvious comparison. So I guess it's easier to think of it that way.
So when I'm saying tax rate, I'm talking prior to any CLA. Because if I go to this last page and I look at Killington, and I see Killington's tax rate will go up 3.71%. Now, I've lost another argument for probably about 9 years, or since Act 60 started, Jennifer, that we really don't understand the way the state has done these taxes. But it's a 3.71% increase, but also at the same time, the town of Killington last year had 101 point whatever CLA, and now we're down to 99 point whatever. So last year, whatever that standard tax rate was, $1.52, because we were over 100% by 1.5 points or whatever, that tax rate from $1.52 came down 1.5%. Now that we're below 100%, that tax rate will go up by that percentage. So part of that increase is because our houses in our town are increasing. It has nothing to do with the school budget.
I know that, you're always right on that, Jimmy. I will tell you, the problem I look at, what sticks out to me in particular, is, a Bridgewater and Pomfret. I mean, Pomfret's almost flat, but Bridgewater sees a 3.8% increase, and we're not operating Prosper Valley this year. So that, to me, I mean, I don't know, a Bridgewater resident has to be like, we don't even have a school anymore, and now my taxes are going up. I mean, that's not right.
So what I'm saying is that I would question, what is the CL difference from last year to this year in Bridgewater?
In Bridgewater, I don't know.
We all went from 92.9 to 91.4.
Okay, so that's only about 0.5% of that 3.7.
The underlying is all changing at exactly the same rate. It's only adjusted by
Yeah.
CLA, right?
So in this, now walk us through. I mean, you've got it all written out here, Meredith. But what are the investments? What do you have in here that's giving us the 1.3% increase?
Right, so if you look, there's a section of the report that's called Budget Strategy. So probably the single biggest expense in this budget by far is meeting contractual obligations and the cost of moving onto a single contract. So that includes, we've talked about the 11.8 health insurance cost, but that is an overall cost of $755,000.
So this has gone up. We had originally said to you it was $685 that we had in contractual obligations. You see it's now $755.
But it's the $755 because the expectation was that there wouldn't be a settlement on the negotiation. And over the course of the last week, after the budget was originally prepared, it looks like there may be a settlement to the negotiation. So all I can go from is the first number of 685 was based on the variables at the time.
I know that. I'm just this is
it wasn't an error. It's updated information that can still be incorporated into the budget.
So, that is the biggest add to this budget. Then there's kind of categories of adjustments related to addressing student enrollment and the facility issue at Prosper Valley. So in this budget, it integrates Prosper Valley School into WES, but provides funding for maintaining the Prosper Valley facility over the course of the year next year. The budget, based on the vote earlier, moves Reading Elementary School students in grades 4 through 6 to WES. This budget removes 2 administration and a nursing position from Prosper Valley. It removes 1.7 administration positions from Reading, while adding an additional classroom paraprofessional position. And it reduces unified arts positions both at the elementary and middle school, high school levels to adjust for declining enrollment. None of those positions are a full position. They're like FTE portions of positions that we no longer need the whole amount to cover the demand for some of our special subject areas. Then what you see next are investments related to improved student outcomes. So one of the things that this budget does, much like how we had contracts that differed from school to school, we had special subjects that differed from school to school at the elementary level. So some, I believe it was Prosper Valley had 10 different special subjects and Reading had 5. And what impact that had on core academic program, making sure that whatever students were involved in was impactful. And one of the places that was really looked at this year was in the area of world language. Both our world language teachers and our administrators had looked at the model, and kind of a one-time-a-week model that was occurring in a number of our schools was not seen as the most impactful way to teach world language. So we had a team that went out and looked at this, and one of the things that came from that team was multiple exposures over a course of a week. So we're made the adjustment here where students in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade would get Spanish 3 times a week for 45 minutes. And having that as an equity issue across the district, all schools would have that. Other investments related to student outcomes relate to trying to build out kind of this Department of Teaching and Learning, that these current numbers reflect an addition of 0.6 to an elementary curriculum coordinator and an advanced math coach at the high school level. There are other pieces that are currently in the budget that would stay in the budget, such as the coaching positions, and they would just move from the lab classroom outside of that environment. And this budget also provides full school day pre-K programming in each of our 2019-20 elementary campuses. And what we would be looking at in terms of a cost there is that we are projecting revenues for that extended day program to be in the area of $55,000. We would lose that revenue in order to expand it to a full free pre-K program. And then finally, there's an establishment of a line item for capital improvements. So there's $150,000 in there, which currently conversations would seem that it would be most likely spent for the fiscal year 20 on a Killington roof and some safety measures that are needed.
Can I ask one thing? So there would still be, what's the after-school status at our various campuses? That people could pay for, but what's the status of offering after school? Do we offer it at all the schools?
We currently offer it at Killington West. It was not offered at Prosper Valley. And for the first time this year, it's been offered at Reading, although Reading is really struggling to sustain it. So what this is saying, this is not saying that free pre-K would be... No,
it shouldn't be. I mean,
there would be a charge for that.
But I think the offering is really important.
Yeah, but there is a challenge, and as we come together over time as an integrated district, I think really looking at the viability of our after-school programs.
Oh, yeah.
How can we make these robust and really quality experiences?
I've dealt with it the last
kids.
5 years
in
Killington.
Yeah.
I know it's taken a long time to build it up, where we now have 25, 30 kids every day after school, but it's an expensive process to get it going. And I mean, you're just hoping to break even on it.
Yeah, in terms of, that actually, the after-school programming is not addressed here as an additional investment or something like that. Honestly, I think if we did an audit of those programs, we would see that we have some work to do in terms of both viability financially and quality of programming. Yeah. So that's, over time, something that I would hope that we would be able to look at and kind of respond to as a unified district, much as we have with buildings and grounds, for example. So that's in a nutshell kind of what's in here. A couple things that you won't see in here. One is that there was initially a conversation related to a post-secondary counselor. We really, in talking more with the team at the middle school, high school, they're feeling that could be addressed by really kind of doing a deep study of our counseling department and how things are allocated there. So we have removed that from this budget. And there was a request for a consultant for a year around safety, trying to get some of the recommendations put into place that came out of the safety report. We have moved those expenses over to a Title IV grant, so they do not show up in this appropriated budget.
What are we losing in the Title IV funds for?
So this year, those Title IV funds were utilized for the Patel for Kids organization that is supporting us in our strategic planning. So we had monies set aside that were one-time monies that we will no longer have a need for them next year. So the idea would be that we would then use those one-time monies for this safety consultant.
Can I just be clear, I guess, just because you mentioned the curriculum coordinator, that's not actually part of this budget, unless it's duplicated on both budgets. So just because you mentioned that.
Richard, can you speak to where the curriculum coordinator landed?
Curriculum coordinator for elementary school is in the WCSU budget.
Okay.
And so, you were absolutely correct. And it's not double counted.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, so when we're talking about it, just because you mentioned the curriculum coordinator, that it's not actually part of that expense.
Just on the small school grant, there's a decrease.
There is. What happened on the small school grant, Bob, is apparently the Bridgewater Pomfret Small School Grant, which we always understood once the organizations were joined and it was a joint school, the small school grant stayed at that level and it was protected. But apparently within the understanding of the state of Vermont AOE, it actually decreased by 1/3 in the first year, 1/3 in the second year, and would have decreased by 1/3 in the third year. Because the merger has been put in place, it just dropped by I believe 1/3 from what the original one was. I've had several conversations with AOE, with Brad James over there, who is the one that is bringing this all together. That there's no ambiguity in his mind as far as what was going on with that small school grant and where the small school grants are going forward. So the one for Killington stays the same. The one for Reading stays the same. And the one for Pomfret/Bridgewater is what it was this past year. I had always thought, and I had been budgeting, as if it had been retained at a flat level until I found out that it was not, and what the reasons were in the statute in which they had placed the joint school in determining the small school grant.
Was it the timing of the merger, the reason we lost?
I don't know the answer to that, Bob. Okay. I have not pushed it from a legal perspective to find out what that is, and that's certainly
your understanding is our understanding.
My understanding was the understanding the board had provided, that once the joint school became a joint school, I'm sure Justin feels the same way, that the small school grant stayed at that level. But that is not the way the AOE had been handling the small school grant.
So we retain the combined merged school entity maintains the small schools grant.
It does, but at a third lower than what the original small school grant was.
The reason that Reading doesn't fall in that category?
Because they didn't go through a joint school, and for whatever reason, the joint school was put on this program of reducing the small school grant by 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3.
Totally punitive. I mean,
I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I have not found an avenue working back in with AOE to get any other kind of an answer. So I think the next step is to go in more from a legal perspective and our understanding of what it is. I had a conversation with Greg Green on this to try and understand, was there anyone who had stated that this is what it was? I know we always spoke about it, but was there anything more formal that stated that it was there? Right. And he didn't have anything for me to go on from that. So that's the reason you're seeing a reduction in the small school grant.
Okay. And then money's necessary for remediation at TPVS, the Pomfret School?
Yes.
Are those, is that in here?
There currently isn't any money beyond the original $25,000 that was allocated this year for any kind of mediation at Prosper.
I thought we upped to 50.
Well, there was, no, it
25
was
was-
25 from this summer. I mean, that wasn't.
Well, there was 25 that was spent without the board voting when the issue was first found, correct?
That was the
25
cleaning.
put
That was
aside
the
this year.
cleaning that occurred.
And then I thought we,
Then we
And there was an additional
25.
25, Jim, that I understand was to be
Yeah.
used for engineering studies.
okay, so
and
the
for
50 is
engineering
me
would come
thinking
on.
the 25
Yeah,
or 25.
I'm working off the 25 that was our request for engineering
And
studies.
before we jump any further, like, just the last conversation about the small schools grants, instead of putting it to towns or to schools, we're trying to get away from silos, and we're trying to be one, so we should just.
And it actually will be paid now to the MUD in total.
Right, but I'm saying, instead of saying we're losing a third from and picking out a school, I don't want to do that. We're losing a certain percentage of the total, that's all.
Correct.
Well,
So we don't pick out a school.
no, I get that, but you can't get to the future unless you bridge it with the past. So that, my point is to understand where we had this agreement by virtue of a voluntary merger.
Correct.
We now have a completely different interpretation.
So they probably
it's
thought
good.
two schools going together,
Don't
a
need as
small
much money.
school would be, would be a big school. That's probably what they
But
thought.
just to complete the thought, so I'm not clear on knowing that we don't yet know definitively what remediation looks like. What, but yet there's no allocation of funds. Is it anticipated that we would be pulling out of a building and facilities fund? I mean, we can't, I mean, the projection is we don't remediate over the next year. That's not my understanding.
My understanding as it relates to the budget is there aren't any mediation funds in here. What we will find out, hopefully, over the course of the next period, as the engineers complete their study, is this is the mediation that is necessary to bring that building back into a condition that it can be a school. Then there's the committee that is underway to determine how we're utilizing each one of the schools. And if there's a determination to mediate the school, then we get into how to fund it. And if the funding is done through a bond issue, for example, that has to be voted on separately. We aren't in a position in order to do a bond vote for the upcoming March meeting.
Right. This is a bit revealing here.
Well, it's,
No, but in as much as if we anticipated being able to use this building over the course, it was going to be closed for remediation over the next school year.
correct.
To get to a place where we had the ability to use it for some purpose, still to be determined, now a committee in place to look at that.
Following school year, correct.
But if this is, as it is, there's an allocation of 50,000 of which we've used half to date?
No, we use the original 25 to 30 for the original cleanup.
Okay.
And then the other 25's been committed to engineering firms to come in to look.
So what we're hoping is that within that 50,000 is all that we're going to need to do to bring this building back online.
No, it's
That's
just coming up
engineers.
with what is it
What
going
are
to
your
cost and
options?
what's the plan? What
You
are our
already
options?
spent 25, we as a group already spent $25,000 in August to clean up. We as a group voted $25,000 to bring in engineers to give us a plan for a dollar amount. We as a group were told that we did not have any funds in our budget for this, and we couldn't find it. There was a number at one time of $500,000 that we could not find $500,000 in our budget. And we as a group said that it would have to be a bond vote. So once this engineer comes in with a
I don't know that
cost.
we said it had to be a bond.
Well, it said it
vote.
would-
We
well, we
needed
have-
to know, I don't think that's accurate. I think we needed to know what we were gonna do and what that was gonna cost. We weren't just gonna pick money out of the sky and just say, let's put this in the budget. we don't know what we're gonna do, and we have no idea what it's gonna cost.
Would people feel
So,
comfortable?
I think the idea was, I mean, really the way I understood it was, we need a plan before we can figure out how we would pay for this. Whether it's a bond, whether we'll be able to get any private donations, whether we'll put it in the budget. I mean, we don't have that information. We didn't, I mean, I think we really figured that the timeliness, we would not be able,
To
I
incorporate
had
it
no,
into the
I had
fiscal
no
20
confidence that
budget.
we were gonna be able to figure
Correct.
out exactly what we needed and how much that was gonna cost to be able to put that in this budget.
Right, but what's revealing is that you're really talking about 2 years.
No, because.
Well,
we
I
have
think
funding.
potentially what we're,
You have a vote in
Give them a vote
June.
for a bond.
If they
Oh,
have.
anytime, I'm thinking about having to go from
No,
March
no,
to
no,
March.
no,
Wait,
no.
You can give a special vote
Listen,
for a bond.
if the number comes out to be $100,000, and we can find it in our budget at the time, because it's a rolling budget, then we can save from there.
Sure.
If the number comes in at $500,000 or higher, if there's people that are willing to donate money for it, then you can find it from there. How fast can they put up the money? If it has to go to a bond vote, this board is able to have a special vote at any time. I think it's a 30 or 45-day warning.
right.
Okay, so we can come in and say, let's say it had to go to the bond vote, and it was $250,000. We would then, right away, when we found out, have a special meeting, we need to put this up for a bond vote, and we need to get on it right away.
Okay.
That's
So
what we
people
have to
would-
do. We don't have to wait till next March.
I guess my concern is what if we get the report back, right, and it is only gonna be $100,000 to do it, but we have no money allocated, and then we're gonna have put our educators and stuff in a scramble if we decide we want the building back online for next year, right? That's gonna be the issue. So
No,
could we just do could we allocate?
What I would also propose, if it's a $50,000 or $100,000,
Ritual.
that can be incorporated into the fiscal '21 budget, which goes effective on July 1st, which gives a 3-month period for something of that size to be remediated within the building.
Would it make sense to do a fund transfer though to building maintenance for a small, for a chunk of it, so we're not scrambling maybe so much? You could start like $50,000.
I-
But we're already putting
We can certainly-
$150,000 in this budget
yeah.
for capital needs for
Right.
other building budget. So if we know by, what Richard's saying is we know by, April or whatever. I mean, one of the other things is, and believe me, in the middle school, high school, we got hit with some things in the middle of the year, and we just had to go to Richard and say, we need to find it.
And we have
So
another
if
one
it's
for next
50 grand,
year.
if it's $50,000, then it's up to us going to say, let's find it, okay? But we also have to wait for the whole report to see what's going on with the whole decision.
The $150,000 of capital improvements, we've got projects that can be spent on, whether it be the roof at Killington, or Roger will certainly appreciate the fact that the way they move septic out of this building and into the town septic system is a big pump out in front, and you can see it out by the front street there. That's a $100,000 replacement, and if we're well at the end of life, maybe a little further. So, there are many ways for us to spend dollars in this building or on others on that 150. I would not assume the 150 will end up being unallocated.
So I'm just asking if the board's comfortable, if we think we would increase that amount a little bit in lieu of the roof and the pump, and then maybe needing to do something to get the ball rolling here without having to scramble for funds. I realize that Richard probably can and does and has in the past, but it obviously has some kind of implication somewhere else, right? If he's taking money from somewhere else.
And I'll just stick to it. I've just finished time to do one, right? We had all these discussions, and I think the plan is that we can still, the school is not planned to be open until next year. Not this school year, the following school year. And the school year starts in August, and the new school budget starts in July. So even if it came in right now as $100,000 next year, let's say this year it comes or next year it comes in June, $100,000. We can be budgeting that for the following year, is what Richard is saying.
What you're saying is authorization to spend once the towns vote?
No,
No.
the money is actually, can't be spent until the 1st of July.
So you get 50
With a bond, a bond is done when the bond vote is successful.
I'm not talking about a bond.
But the budget is July 1st of that school year.
You can work something out with a vendor or a contractor to be paid July 1, believe me, they do the work. No, if somebody local is gonna be doing the job at Pomfret, right? and they want to see their school get open. I mean, they start the work in May, they get finished, whatever, and then the bill comes in on July 1.
It's a lot of assumptions.
That's a huge assumption.
There are.
And how hard
assumption-
it's been for
I
Joe
know
to
that,
get
I
anything
know that
done.
assumption would work in Killington, so maybe I
No,
don't know
what-
your town, I'm sorry.
What I can say is, just to give a quick where the engineers are and what's been going on. I had reported at the last meeting that we had put relative humidity meters into the floor, and that site is still available for anyone to see. We're still running at 99.9% relative humidity amongst most of those meters, and we don't know why. Joe did some core drillings through the slab just to get through the slab, and then the first engineer, the one that works with, what's Heather's firm's name? And will be coming in and going down through. Now what we have is, for whatever reason, we've got very wet sand, not water, but very wet sand in those core drillings. Again, don't really know why. The other engineer who's coming in doing the building health study, we're hoping he's going to start before the end of January. He said that that was his expectation. And he looks at it from a slightly different direction. We dug a test hole in the back between the building and the river. They went down, I think, about 3 feet, at which time there was standing water. So almost like you'd have at a beach. You dig down, all of a sudden water's coming into the hole. So we know there's a lot of water there. The question still is, why is it getting up through the slab? And the engineers so far haven't come upon a reason. We know the exterior drains have failed. Those have been dug out. We've seen that. But we don't know why water is getting up through the center of the building. How is it seeping that far in and coming up through? We don't have an answer yet, which is why this is so problematic.
So the perimeter drains have been fixed?
No, the perimeter drains have not been fixed. Going along with the perimeter drains being fixed, which means just plugging the lines together, is also a recommendation to not only waterproof, but to put on a actual ceiling cover, like you would have the ice and rain cover you put on your roof, as well as putting plastic sheets on there that actually move the water away from the foundation. Now, this is one engineer, and what the board asked is, let's get all the players together to figure out what the right answer is on this one. So we're trying to get those people down through what they're doing. We can only go as quickly as we can, and I think we have the right players that can come in here and say what they think is right, and what they believe the solution is. Our HVAC engineer is waiting to see how much is anticipated for humidity be coming up through the slab before they determine how to size the dehumidification system.
So, we go back to a previous conversation we had, and that is this idea that, we can't go appropriating or, investing a lot of money in this until we know there is a solution, right? I mean, I go back to the same question I asked when we had our facilities person here. Do we actually have a solution that's viable? And to this point, I haven't heard that there's absolutely a viable solution. And Bob, I get your pain on this, but we don't have dollars to be putting into this not knowing that there is a viable solution. We're investing in the engineering, we're asking the questions. I think that's an entirely appropriate response at this point. Anything beyond that, it's just way too premature. You gotta show there is a solution. Somebody has to show there is a solution. I love that school, but can it be fixed is a really viable question that we have to address.
Yeah, I'm just the eternal optimist.
Get it, but on this board, we can't do that. We don't
No,
have the money for that.
I get it, Lou. I'm just making sure the administration is sort of anticipating what could play out, expecting that there will be a solution, and I know that that's still undetermined. So I just want to make sure that there's the ability to move money if it works something less than a full bond issue and vote. There's the ability to do it. The board's got to decide to do it, and there's got to be a solution to be able to do it. So I get all that.
Right.
But I just, the idea of the funds transfer, the reason I say that is because we could use it on the Killington roof for the septic out here. So it's not like it's related to that building, but it would be a safeguard so we don't run into any mid-year financial crisis. And also, I guess that aside, I don't know, I'm not going to look at it right now, but what do we have for the building? At least if we're maintaining it well enough to the point we think we have no fear of any reoccurring additional issues? If so, if we think we're going to do something possibly with the building in the future, we want to make sure we have at least enough money in the budget to continue maintaining it at the level it is. Or if mold reoccurs, if there's money set aside to, there has to be some additional. I just want to make sure we're not scaling down the maintenance to such a point that it could make the issue worse and actually be more detrimental to the building than. how it
Right now,
currently sits.
we still have our custodian that is there. He's splitting some of his time with Wes, given that the students have gone over to Wes. But we have a custodian there. We've got heat. We've got electricity. We're running. The building is running. It's not going to be allowed to just close down. And if mold shows up again next year, there's nothing in the budget to remediate the mold. If mold shows up next year, hopefully we're at a point where there's an understanding of how to solve the mold problem, and that becomes the project.
Well, I mean, I would think that we expect mold to show up because nothing has been done to fix the problem.
No, that's not necessarily true.
Well, then if mold doesn't show up next year, then you no longer have a mold problem.
Right.
So if you no longer have a mold problem, then why would you invest $500,000 to fix something you don't have?
How do we want
We
this
need to
relate
wait,
the
we
budget?
need to wait for the reports to come back, and we really can't put any money towards
I
it.
mean, I think at this point, we've decided.
Appreciate the conversation.
We're going to wait and see what happens, and then we'll have a whole conversation about it. Is there anything, Pamela, do you want to add?
No, I wanted to ask a different question.
Okay, but
about the budget.
anything more on this?
Just that we have 18 months to figure it out.
Okay, Pamela.
I have one question and one comment about this paperwork, and it's, sorry, I was the same last year about the food budget, but, so, last January, this board voted to reduce the budget by $200,000, and I think it was understood that it was 200. I looked it up.
Well, the only thing included in the budget was a $100,000 reduction, not a $200,000.
Okay, but the vote was 200. I just looked it
Yeah,
up.
I think what happened around that is that the board initially looked at 200,000, and then there was a question of who was going to run the food service.
If I could just continue, I was going to say I think it was understood that that was very ambitious, and that was what would be aimed for. And so fine, I'm not asking anyone to be accountable to that, but I am continually, just like last year, confused by how it's. I mean, I know this is not the full budget, but sorry, bear with me for 1 second. So on the second page, under food service, it's pretty proposed from last year to next year, or this year to next year, it's pretty flat. I mean, it's almost exactly the same. So.
But the revenues go up by 50 or 50.
So, okay, hold on 1 second.
He accounted for 100,000 in the WCSU budget, correct?
Pardon me?
You accounted for 100,000 of the WCSU budget, but now is
For
not
this year,
counting as
we brought that across back into the mud.
So there's a
That's correct.
$100,000 difference in the WCSU budget, which is.
But I want to make sure that we understand that what we have in front of us here is an FY19 opposed to FY20. And what we spoke about last year was FY18 to FY19. We were expecting this current year that we're in, that we would see and we did vote on a $200,000, okay? So when you're looking at this right now, my question, when you're saying it's flat, the question would be, is in 2007, 2018, was that $200,000 higher? We voted for 2019 to be $200,000 less than 18. We don't have the 18 number in front of us.
It does, if my memory is correct, and it's pretty good, it was close to $800,000.
Okay.
So I think there is a pretty good reduction.
2017 or 2018, if the number was $850,000 or $856,000.
No, I think it was like 780 or something like that.
I thought you said it was 800.
I said it was close.
I thought your memory was good. 3 seconds ago, you said 800.
Close.
And all I'm saying is that The savings should have been
I got you.
in the 2019. If you're looking at this and saying $656,433 in 2019 and saying it's $656,950 in 2020, we were not expecting any savings from there. That should be flat, and that is flat. It's
Okay.
what the question is, the year before that, what it was.
Where do we stand now?
Plus the revenue.
In the state. I mean, that was always, the big problem to us, that we were one of the biggest spenders on food service in the state of Vermont. Any idea now where we stand?
No different information available yet than what Matt had brought forward when he presented that. We're still waiting for the next round of stat reports to come from the state. And what we need to, just to put the timeline together, there was the vote on the budget, which took place in March. There was the RFP went out, and the actual determination to work with the internal solution, I think, was done in June. So, and what we found with the RFP is they were all relatively in the same place, approximately $160,000, $170,000 deficit. What we've gone through so far this year is just taken the first 3 to 3.5 months and extrapolated it out over the course of the year. And it looks as if our internal solution is going to come out in that $160,000 range. What I've incorporated into the budget for next year is a continuation, at least as of now, of that $160,000 deficit. There are areas of opportunity. For example, we have a number of students who qualify for free and reduced lunches that are not taking free and reduced lunches. Why is a pretty complex answer, I'm sure. If we're able to get those free and reduced up from the 50% level to the 70% level, for example, we're going to see an improvement on the financials. I really didn't want to push it any harder in the budget because we don't have any real experience on whether we can get from 50 to 70 or what's going to go on.
I think the numbers that you did share, I looked at them very briefly, but they showed the number of meals. Like we have multiple drivers. One was the number of meals being served, which actually went up quite a bit, especially in middle school and high school.
Right.
Right. So that driver is good. I think our revenue, correspondingly, that we're missing a big free and reduced lunch piece, which would be a which we're the lowest, like one of the lowest in the state on reimbursement for free and reduced lunch.
Correct.
That's changed.
So the question is why are the kids not, and what can we do to assist on that? What we're also seeing though is in a couple of our schools we're seeing very strong support from adults, and that then speaks to the food must be improving. Adults are much interested in the quality of the food than the volume. So there's a lot of good things that are going on, but really it's only 3 months worth of data.
Okay.
So
thank you.
You're welcome.
Just in terms of the food service, I feel like these questions have been brought up a few times at meetings, and it's been discussed having Gretchen come in and do a presentation. And is that on the upcoming agendas after we get through the budget?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, we've had it in the work plan, and it's
I know that it's probably on the, but I feel like a lot of these questions can be addressed by her. Well, a good. So I mean, between the two of you.
Yeah. She was on for January, and with what was going on here, it's probably better to hold it for the next meeting. But,
and I'm sure that that the whole automatic payments have made have they made a significant difference in the fact that, because that was the problem last year, is there was a lot of people who didn't pay. Now with these automatic payments, I mean, personally, it makes my life a lot easier. I can imagine for a lot of parents in Weston, they're paying more because they know that they need to.
Yeah.
It just comes out.
No, I think that certainly has been an improvement. The whole system we put in place has been an improvement. The quality that Gretchen has brought, which she can share when she comes in, has been an improvement. The question is, will we ever get to what I had hoped for, which was a break even? And luckily there was someone sitting on the other side of that one in Matt that said, maybe you don't want to push it quite that hard.
So and then I also had a comment. At the last meeting, we talked about asking you, Mary Beth, for sort of comparables of different budget models and even looking at some items that we all kind of feel are, I forgot there's a word for this and I forgot the expression, but that we assume or just we need it, and to even look at those kinds of things and really get, just take a hard look at the budget and the things that we take for granted. And I don't really see that here, and now I feel like it's really too late in our budget process to do that. So I really hope that we can do that through the next year for the budget after this.
We have to pass the budget by June 30th. You don't have to pass it by the March meeting.
So to expand.
I just want to make that
Yeah,
very
yeah.
clear.
Okay.
We
To-
don't have to pass it by the March meeting. We can call special meetings to pass the budget. So, in all honesty, yes, the administration wants to get it done so that we can pass it in March meeting as we traditionally have. But if push comes to shove and this board is not happy or don't feel like they've seen what they want to see, we can ask for that information.
And this finance committee is the reason we're asking for more answers on certain things. And one of them was the food cost. One of them is where Mary Beth was speaking earlier about the different towns with the after-school programs. These are questions that are going on in the finance committee, and we're still waiting for some answers to come back. You have to understand that, one of the other things is like last year, we had a vote in March, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, the state came out and changed the whole dynamics of it. It may actually be better that we wait till a June 30th vote.
Well, I mean,
I'm just saying that we
There's
would have
some
a real
contracts and
idea
all that.
of where our tax rate
Yep.
and everything else is from the state of Vermont. And it might be a good message to the state of Vermont that if we're supposed to, as a board, put a fiscally responsible budget in front of the taxpayers and pass it, then they better give us the right information for us to vote on before we vote on it. Because that's crazy. We put a budget together over a course of 8 months, and then we vote on it, and then all of a sudden they come out and change the whole dynamics of our budget and say, oh, by the way, you have to come up with $500,000 this year. That's what they did to us that one year. So I have no problem saying I'd rather wait for the numbers.
One of the things, just to respond, Kim, I know, for example, one of the things people asked about was like athletics, to take a look into that. And so I met with our athletic director, and in talking with him, the feedback that I received is that, well, that line item is about $446,000 for athletics, but that the place where you would cut back is to start to pull away from offering certain types of sports. So, in talking with FinCom and other groups, that right now trying to get through a process of, would you start to pull back from sports and that kind of thing, given the budget time frame, is really challenging. But there are lots of areas that we can, go deeper in and unpack. And I would say over time that there are so many pieces that we're trying to pull together right now. But we're not certainly at a place yet where I think we've been exhausted in terms of looking at and uncovering, or overturning every rock around it.
I love to see how that's going to go when we start talking about anything about removing sports. I mean, you think we're getting fired at now. I would rather see us start maybe scaling back on some of our new investments before we shoot ourselves this year.
So I think I told you.
Let's start with the football first, and we'll really just die right away.
In my note, I'm starting to like the transparency in here. I still think we have a ways to go. I don't have a piece of paper on it that says how much money we're actually spending in this district between the SU and the CUD. I really need to see that. It's 18 million plus something. And I see all these line items, but they again are netted out of the SU budget, so we don't see that. So I think just for transparency, because we're effectively the same board, right? Just a few votes difference. And the SU only represents what we share with Barnard Elementary School, a little bit of Pittsfield County. They should really be presented all at once, so that you really understand all of what we're talking about. Because otherwise, there's always different buckets of money or revenue that I just don't know what exists. So that would be my one comment on the budget details.
I just don't think it's right the way the state of Vermont has us putting out a budget for vote to the taxpayers for 18 million, whatever. And then we as a group of 18 people vote on a budget, and we're the only ones for $5 million for the SU. And I don't really know what numbers have moved from one place over to the other. I still don't get that. I'm still like saying, if I look at the SU budget that we're supposed to vote out tonight, and it's $4,997,000.
Should we start to pass those out?
No, I'm just saying, but you know, but it's $4,997,000. But 2 years ago, that budget was 3.5 million, I think. So either the SU got really even more top heavy, or we moved items from the budget that the taxpayers pay on over to the SU. So what I have in front of me on page 8 of this is telling me it's $4,997,960. Let's just call it $5 million. And in 2017 it was let's call it 3.
But that's because of special ed, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
what would have happened
special
to-
ed and some other items. And I don't see that, you know, and I just don't, you know, like,
I think it's very hard to tell, like, unless you see them together, like, you're always going to get these questions, right? And it's impossible to resolve unless you see them together.
There's a significant reduction in special ed, I guess, and I think it's the curriculum coordinator and buildings and grounds is in there too, that washes some of it, so it only shows the $100,000 reduction, you know, it's
Richard, do you want to speak to kind of the change in numbers that people are seeing here and what's happening with the WCSU budget year over year?
From last year to this year, and there are a couple of pieces that were moved from the budget. For example, the $100,000 reduction in the food service. Last year was in the WCSU, which thereby in effect reduced the WCSU budget. And as I thought down through that, the food only, the WCSU budget is paid by Barnard as well as the MUD and a little bit from Pittsfield, as Jim said, or whoever over there. The reduction in the food budget, given that Barnard doesn't have food, shouldn't be in effect a benefit to Barnard by virtue of being in the SU. So I moved it over to the MUD because it more appropriately puts that reduction with the organizations that actually have the food service. There was another one with technology. You're seeing a reduction in technology, and the same the technology for the most part is being spent in the high school and within West to a greater degree. So I took it from the SU in that case, because very little of it in effect is a Barnard expense, and put it into the MUD because it was more appropriately placed based on the districts that are actually using that technology. This is not a science. There could have a debate on where should certain expenses be. Mary Beth has said a couple of times that she'd like to get all of the professional development out of the MUD and into the SU so that it's a single pool of dollars that can be allocated across all the school districts. So there's a lot of reasons to move it from one entity to the other. If and when we reach the point where Barnard joins the MUD, the SU goes away. We end up with a single budget, which is really what Matt's talking about, what Jim's talking about, a single budget that has a single group of expenses. And then you aren't sending assessments from the SU over to the MUD. Right now, in order to fund the SU, there's a certain amount, because that's where all the special ed is located. 54% of the special education is funded by the state, and the remainder is funded through an assessment that goes over to.
Richard, I mean, I think we all totally get that. I guess what we're seeing here is you should just see it inclusive of.
Not disagreeing.
Yeah, inclusive of those numbers, right? So
well, where I'm coming from is like you just said, we moved 100,000 from the school where the taxpayers vote on over to the SU. But when I look at this one sheet,
You actually moved it from the SU to the one that the taxpayers vote
okay,
on.
and then so, but we don't have that in front of us.
You don't.
And if I was on your side of the table, and I was trying to sell a budget to a finance committee that then has to come here to sell the budget to the rest of the members here, I would be pointing these things out. And we have so many questions because we don't see it. And I think that's what Matt is asking for, and that's what I'm asking for.
And Jim, I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying. The budget right now, we've been trying to get some stability on the budget just on the investments that we're making, which had nothing to do with moving 100,000 from one to the other. It's still being paid for. It's still incorporated into the tax rate, whether it comes in through the assessment and impacts the tax rate, or whether it's actually within the MUD. It still has the same effect on the tax rate. I agree with the need for a greater level of transparency to a degree. I'm confused on exactly how to be able to provide that in a way that provides the vote to do the SU and then the voters vote to do the other.
So I'm going to go into the budget here.
It's very clear to you, Matt, how to do it, and I should spend more time with you, so I understand as clearly as you do on how to present it as transparently as you
do. Right now, we're not into
well, yeah, I mean.
We're not into the, we're not into the
Any
budget.
other
Okay, so I don't
from
have.
the board?
Yeah, I mean, so the next steps, I mean, we keep leaving these meetings. 2 meetings ago, we left with, direction on certain positions we didn't necessarily want included. Then we had last month's meeting where Mary Beth walked us through why she thought those positions were so important, and we left last month's meeting saying we want a level fund. We don't want to see this kind of increase when we have one school that we're not operating at all this year. I mean, we're heating it and have a custodian, but so the direction, I mean, like I said, the finance board keeps having these meetings, but I mean, we'd like some more direction from the rest of the board too, because this, I mean, we can sort of whittle away certain things, but we need to make some decisions about where you want it, what kind of spending you're comfortable with. You see the ramifications to the tax rate, to a certain extent. And like Jim said, it's not all buttoned down. I mean, we can put this out there, and there could be changes in March. But let's get some. We'd like some more feedback from you, because it's not just the 3 of us. I mean, we're giving Richard pushback. We are, trying to understand. But I mean, we need pushback or we need your input on where we want to spend our money and what kind of tax increase we're comfortable with. So let me hear from you.
I was not at the last meeting. I was at the meeting that we had a executive session and we came out with certain directives. I attended the first 10 or 15 minutes of the last meeting because it was a special meeting and I had a prior engagement. I came here so we made sure we had a quorum, and it did help out because we didn't at first have a quorum, and I had to leave. If I was here, I would have been arguing that we're going too fast with some of the investments that we all folded in on and saying, as long as it's level funded. We were just told that if Barnard comes on, then it would be a whole budget. So then you really wouldn't have the 50,000 for the security person or whatever, because it would be a whole budget that everyone was voting on. I hear from teachers that, and I even heard it from Mary Beth, that the teachers are not really, they're not going to be so acceptable at first about coaches. But at the end, they're going to love them and whatever. But, I mean, I still want to know what happened to last year's investment. I mean, last year we were told, let's have 2 classrooms with labs in them or whatever, coaching labs, and 2 teachers in each one. And now I'm being told that we'll only have 1 in each one, so I guess that was the wrong move to have 2. I was told last year, which I was against, of taking our private pre-Ks and turning them into public school pre-Ks. I was the only one that voted no, not to do that, because we were all told that it was going to be cost neutral. Now I'm sitting here today hearing that it's $50,000 revenue shortfall by making that move. I mean...
No, an additional, Jim, if we go to the 3rd pre-K, free. I mean, so
Well,
it's
it's in
not,
this
it's
budget.
not just 50, it's 50,000 less. I mean, we paid.
Well,
lose
let's
that
just make
revenue.
it, let's
Even
just
more,
make it
costing us
simple.
even more.
We were told that if we went to a public pre-K, that it would be cost neutral. Number one, it was cost neutral, it was supposed to be cost neutral to the taxpayers, but to the parents that I heard at Killington, it actually raised their cost of sending these kids, their kids to the pre-K. And now the next year's budget, what I'm hearing is that forget about that move. It didn't really work out, but now we want to become free throughout the whole district, and it's not going to be cost neutral. It's actually going to, whatever you want to call it, we're not going to get the revenue. That's an increase into my pocket.
Oh, it's definitely going to cost more than it cost last year, and what we did this year cost more than it cost, because it didn't have a cost the year before when it was private. That's
All
not,
I'm getting
that's
at is, so let me just bring this up. Last year, we were giving information at the last minute, and we didn't really have the information in front of us. We made the choice to go to it, and now we're finding out it cost us. The additions that we're getting put in front of us now, we really don't have enough information to move forward on it, and we say what we said after the executive session. Don't go to a full elementary school curriculum. We don't do the security person. We kind of get rid of the math coach. Those are the things that we had said is what, and what I feel is happening here is this board is making decisions just like we did with Reading, but we're sticking to it, okay? But we're also making decisions, and we made a decision not to do these add-ons, and then we have to come into a full board meeting, which I wasn't at, and we get sold why we have to do it, and we change our mind. We shouldn't be changing our mind. We don't have enough information in front of us to tell us that last year's investments were worthwhile, and yet we're going to throw more at it. And maybe if we don't do all these new investments, maybe we could have kept the teacher or whatever over at Reading and kept them open. I don't know for the 4 years. I really don't know. But I feel like we're jumping so fast into new stuff, and you know, we had a person that told us we will give I will get $500,000 3 years ago, $500,000 for a STEM lab, and it was supposed to be a teacher from this school, this high school was supposed to be running it, and then we said we were going to go to this MIT Nuvu, and we're the only public school in the country that has a Nuvu fellow from MIT. It has to tell you something, folks. It's a $198,000 investment, and this person that said he was going to fund it can't get the money, okay? But it's in our budget this year again. We had this discussion last year about this Nuvu fellow saying we'll give it 1 year, and then they would have to fund it through whatever. Well, guess what? Once again here, in this budget, not the SU budget, but the other budget, there's $198,000 in here for a fellow from MIT.
Is the number 200, Richard?
It is.
I said 200 and I was told 198, so.
I believe I have it.
Well, if I remember correctly, I think last year the recommendation was like 225 to 250. We brought it down to 200. You know, there is, you know, that.
But we said we would do it for that 1 year. This current year, we said we would fund it, and then the next year that person would have to raise those funds. And here we are today. The person hasn't raised the fund. It's $198,000 or 200, whichever one, okay, that's in this budget, and we're the only ones in the country. And yet we're cutting teachers from other places. And we're bickering over some other things, which this $198,000 does not every single kid is going to it. We were supposed to put up a STEM lab, and we were supposed to it was supposed to be with a teacher from this school, correct? Paige?
We would have a fellow for 1 to 2 years.
It was supposed to be funded with.
And then after the funding was no longer there, we would make a decision on what we were going to do, how we were going to fund it. Am I correct, Karen?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
So now
funded for a certain amount of years, the fellow, and then we we would decide as a board if we wanted to continue that funding with NUVU or not and hire somebody full-time in the STEM lab.
Was it funded with the grant or the
Yes.
funding? But we're not, so you're telling me now that the first 2 years was supposed to be funded with this?
It was funded with it.
Why
We're
is
in
it
the
in
third
mid-
year,
what-
aren't we?
No.
Yeah,
Well, last year, we,
Are we
okay, so,
budgeting for the third year, or this is the third year?
budget.
well,
We're
last
budgeting
year,
for
We're
the
budgeting,
third
okay,
year.
so
yeah.
last
If it
year,
was
we
meant to
ended
pay
up
for
putting it in
two,
our
it didn't
budget.
pay for 2 years.
We
it
paid
for
for it
one.
the second year, so you're telling
Not
me
in
that
total.
it was supposed to be
Total,
for
but
2 years?
yes,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right.
So last year, we spent 198 or 200,
Last year, we spent 138 in the budget.
which it was supposed to be funded the 2 years, and
Correct.
we didn't.
This is what I agree that, you know, there's so many initiatives, there's so many programs, they're all terrific, but we can't afford all of them, and this is why I want to look at all of these budget items holistically. You
That's
know,
what the finance committee is asking, and that's why you don't have in front of you
and
a
with
vote
the health
tonight.
insurance increase that we're seeing, and the fact that we have an increasing budget at a time when we have the situation that we have with Prosper Valley and a decrease in cost with Reading, it doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't. I don't know. I don't have anything to say about what I think we should cut, but I just don't think this is a time that we should be seeing any increase.
I say we stick to what we say in the beginning. There's no funding for bring a teacher in to do the STEM lab. Well, I'm one person that says yes, and you're one person that says no.
That's right.
Okay, so this is where we're looking for information from the rest, because I sit on the finance, he sits on the finance, okay?
We're
She
standing.
does.
We stand on
And-
finance.
And
Can I
and
get
we're
some
bringing
other-
these things up to you.
Can I get some other input, please? Matt, Matt?
Yes.
Introduce yourself.
All right.
We appointed you, but you weren't here.
I was taking care of the little one. My name's Matthew Huff. I live in Bridgewater.
Welcome.
I have a 7th and an 8th grader and a 19-month-old.
Congratulations.
Yes, and so he'll be coming to school soon. And my knee-jerk reaction in life is to not spend money. However, I'm a parent of a 7th and an 8th grader who, you know, you talk about all these things and academic excellence and not spending money here to actually have kids learn stuff in class. As a parent, I want to say, spend the money. Because if we have a 5-year program, my kids are out and they don't benefit at all. It's hard to say yes, because I say no to spending money all the time. And most of this stuff goes right over my head right now. But it seems fundamental to start trying to cut some of these things that we don't think are working. I mean, $200,000 is a lot of money. For somebody like these coaches, I know you say this is what we should do. And Bryce has had good points about let the administrators do their job. Don't stick your finger in the middle. In the end, still come back to I'm a parent. I'm sure most of the people on this board are parents. If we don't spend money now on our kids and future kids here at this school, nothing's going to happen. My wife went to school here. She said that it was excellent. We moved here from Chittenden County. CVU is an awesome school. My wife has been there. She's substituted there. They've put a lot of money into that school. We lived there for 13 years. And to be quite honest, moving here and seeing what's going on here and having seen CVU as kind of more of like a model school, there are parts of me as a parent that say I made a mistake in moving here. And that's straight up the truth. If we want academic excellence, I don't want my 7th and 8th grader to have study halls and things like that. Like, they should be in school learning. Like, we should be spending this, well, I don't know what it is, $13,000 a student on them actually learning stuff. Anyway, that's my gripes. I wish that I could look at a piece of paper and say, these are all the things that we're spending. You know, doesn't make sense. Because yeah, like I agree with you. I don't know your name, but I agree with most of what you say so far, in that I don't really know what we're spending all this stuff on, and you can move money around and make it look different, but it's still the same. And I think that we are spending money crazily. And yes, you shouldn't cut sports.
And you what?
You shouldn't cut sports. You know, I mean,
I didn't give you my take on that one. I just said we'll be shot.
You know, it bothers me that...
As long as the girls' soccer program stays.
You're right. Everybody likes girls' soccer. The whole thing about the school in Prosper Valley. Listen, I'm a mason. I go to homes, buildings. I deal with this stuff all the time. If you don't at least fix some of these problems, like the water drainage issue, you are never going to figure out the problem. This is going to be a multi-step process. Nobody is going to go in there and be able to tell you exactly what's wrong over at Prosper Valley. There is not one answer. And there are going to be some steps, and they may be Band-Aids, and they may not be. But from 17 years of experience in construction, like, you didn't need to drill all those holes in the concrete. Like, I could have told you that. If you don't fix some of this water stuff on the outside and see if it stops inside, you're going to be sitting here around this table and debating this forever. It's not going to go away. That whole area in there, I know the guy who built that barn down the road, the other side, he even says that whole valley's full of water. So you're going to have to allocate maybe some money, like Bryce said, get something fixed, and then see what that does. Because there's a lot of water there. You know, those are the things that, I mean, I don't know how you're going to fit into the budget.
So what are people's inclinations as we continue to fine-tune this? What kind of increase do you want to see? You know, I mean, I hear it's crazy that anybody's seeing any increase when we have one building that we're not operating next year. And, you know, so I hear that. Then I hear we need to make all these investments. You know, give us some direction. What do you want to hear? What do you want to see?
Fast track for my kids. I want to see them spend the money now. I want to see results within 5 years, not have a 5-year plan and then see.
When you say fast track, spend the money now, what? Just throw money at anything?
Well, I'm going to listen to her. She's got a master's degree somewhere. You must have some piece of paper that says that. I mean, if you came to me and asked me about masonry, you know, you'd take my professional opinion. I'm going to take her professional opinion.
But then I go and I talk to a teacher and they say we don't need coaches. So do I take a teacher that says I don't need coaches?
Well, Rob, do you think that we need coaches? I hate to throw you under the bus. Rob is an awesome teacher.
His boss is here, so I mean that's also, you have to understand the dynamics of what's going on.
Okay, I think Rob and I get along well.
In terms of professional development, none of us, no matter how long we've been along, need to grow. And I think the idea of coaches is a sound one because it allows that growth to occur in a way that is a conversation and not just, you know, in-service you have for a month or a week or a day and it's over. It's a sustainable piece. So I know that I do like the concept and I think it has real validity in terms of how it will be played out. There are always growing pains in any new process you try. But I think the basic concept is one that is looking not only to the short term, but to the long term, sustaining teacher growth. And definitely we'll need that.
If I could just offer a fundamental kind of thinking around this, is that there is you know, we've got to keep cutting back to keep our taxes low. Or we are going to make some strong investments in this district believing that those strong investments benefit the kids that are here, and have an opportunity to keep our district and move our district to really one of the top, if not the top performing in the state. And that's a fundamental question, right? About, do we have to really look to make sure we keep our tax dollars low? Or are we going to kind of go bold around this?
Yeah, I go.
And it's not a complete continuum that it's either this or that. There's always some balance within that. And what I have presented to you around curriculum coordination in particular is what I know moves things forward. And the district may choose to make that investment now. It may decide to do it in pieces. But I've said this before, but I clearly have heard from this board and this community a sense of urgency around getting our results for kids improved. And so this budget reflects hearing that wish of these community members that we get the kinds of results for kids that families and communities are looking for. And that is not going to come without investment. And I've put things out here that I believe will move us forward in really critical areas, and that there are a number of investments that this district has already made. And I'll go on the record about the movie studio. I believe this whole board needs to get there to see the kind of teaching and learning that's happening there. That is and continues to be a critically strong investment that are going to give our kids a lot of heads up in terms of when they enter their next step.
Talk to some of the students that have been there too, that are taking those courses.
Yeah,
really,
and part of it is I really do think just our intent was to have the meeting there today so that you could take a look at the kinds of things that are happening there, but given the complexity of this agenda, we didn't really feel like we had the luxury to do it today. But I think one of the things I would encourage all board members as it relates to the new studio is to make sure that you've had an opportunity to go there and see what's happening, in assessing whether or not that's an investment that's been worthwhile for kids.
Nobody's questioning, and I'm definitely not questioning how great it is. I'm questioning how that studio got here. It was promised with a funding mechanism that was not followed through.
I know, but Jim.
So let's get the so we're going to talk about, let's cut football. And I mean, to me, that's another, sports is something big for kids, for social and everything else, part of team playing, everything else, and being together. But yet, we're talking about cutting maybe sports down the road. And Matt and the finance subcommittee had put this whole thing together, and we had showed that we were top heavy in certain areas. Okay, we were top heavy in teachers to students to teachers, or teachers to students, whichever way you want to go. We were top heavy in administration. I see a lot of teachers leaving or going, and I see not as much done as administration-wise. I recall going back 8 years ago or 10 years ago, where a lot of teachers were let go when we did budget cuts back then, Roger, as the middle school, high school. And the teachers were really upset with, you're letting all of us go, but there's still more, as you would always say, there's more chiefs than there are Indians, and let's call the teachers Indians, okay? And they're feeling the pain, and there's no chiefs really feeling the pain as much. We're still adding to. That's where I'm coming from. And then you're going to have to
I just want to indicate on the budget
some sort of
here.
board process, please. Like this is it's a free for all in this board meeting. It's a disgraceful way to run a board, right? Let me make a point, especially an important conversation like when we're talking about the budget, right, which is absolutely critical. I mean, the things that we need to invest in, given the statistics that have been brought to light, we've got to invest in supportive instruction, right? That is absolutely critical. Coaches are critical. If we're going to change the number of teachers in classrooms, the number of students in the classroom with them, and we're going to change that ratio, then our teachers actually need to be better at what they're doing. And the reality is, professional development is an ongoing conversation when done properly over a very long term. Curriculum coordination. You simply can't have professional development that's meaningful without curriculum coordination. These things are intricately linked. The fact that this district's gotten this far through this process without having it is absolutely amazing to me, but also not surprising. It happens in lots of places. We have to have these things together. If we're going to make cuts or we're going to make investments, we've got to invest in instruction that supports today's students right now, because we all have kids that are in these schools, right? Makes our teachers better, you know. So there's a couple things we can do. Invest in instruction. You know, we can invest in better curriculum, better coordinated. We can invest in supplemental support and opportunities for students. I mean, our thinking has to be along those lines. Everything else has to be second, right? And eventually we need to rebuild buildings, but these are the things that come first, because we have got to move the needle for the students that are in these classrooms right now today, right? We owe them that. That is our responsibility. We are taxpayers on one side to be frugal and responsible, which I think we have been wherever we are with this budget. And we owe these students the very best we can give them. And that is the very best we can give them right now. I think Mary Beth made some very good recommendations, right? And I think we should follow through on this.
I'll just respectfully disagree. Because
once again, there's a board process.
There's a process.
Jim,
let's listen to, let's hear Bob.
I seem to have forgotten it completely.
Just a quick question. Richard, the increase in healthcare, what percentage of the percentage increase would you attribute to the increase in healthcare in this budget?
325,000 of the 750 that was estimated, 11.8%.
I don't know how you level fund when you have that kind of increase coming at you.
You can't level fund when you have the increases and trying to put everybody onto one salary scale in a 3-year period of time. It's nearly impossible. And especially when you've had 6 different boards pay your teachers in different increments over the last 10 years, and you're trying to correct mistakes that have occurred over those negotiation periods. We will be the first board in the state of Vermont to have all of our teachers on one salary grid with one contract amongst them. And they said it was impossible. It's not impossible, but it is costly, and we have to do it. And, you know, in 3 years, supposedly the state is going to have the benefit of running the healthcare portion of it, and we will no longer have to negotiate that. I don't know what the outcome of that is going to be. I mean, you know, the state workers currently are paying an 80-20 split, and they pay for their added expenses out of that. Will it be the same for teachers? We don't know. But the fact that now all of our teachers are paying an 85-15 split, when half of them were at 0 to 15%, those are costs that we can't control. When the state says you're going to have 11% increase to your premium, we have an 11% increase to our premium. We don't get to decide on that. So much of those savings that we saw because Prosper Valley is closed is eaten up in getting everybody onto one salary scale, being committed to that, so all teachers are equitable across the board in a pay salary scale. And then also for those increases in premium, which is 11% this year for the premium cost.
Raise it.
Matt?
I actually feel the magnitude of the budget is reasonable this year. Like it's, we got a gift from Prosper, which is going to come back next year, which we're going to have to invest in. And I totally support all the thrust of the initiatives. Right? I guess you're going to hear me vote no. It's not because I think the magnitude is wrong. It's not because I think the thrust of the initiative is wrong. I really think we need to rebuild the budget process. We have to rebuild it. Like, we're supposed to vote on the SU budget tonight. The first time I've seen it was when it came over the email this week. Like, I just can't run a $20 million business that way. And so, but I do think, like, we're not being totally profligate, right? A flat budget, flat tax rate is reasonable. I think the focus on the kids is right.
I do agree with Matt on that. My biggest problem is just the lack of time and kind of some of the transparency and us wanting to see things on paper. That being said, the initiatives I'm excited a lot about, and that's one reason I think the profile and like the strategic planning meetings are so great, because we don't have people there that are talking about the restrictions of the budget. They're talking about ideas and what's best for the children, and I think a lot of good has come out of it and will continue to come out of that. and I'm excited to see that part of it. And I don't think the budget is an unreasonable one, but I do agree with the timing and stuff has been horrible. It is much better than last year. Our budget was a presentation, it was a PowerPoint, right? No offense, but it was like a 12-page PowerPoint. That's what we had to vote on. So in comparison, it's much better. But the line by line, I do think is pretty important, and I think it's important to call out certain things. So I guess I would hope in the future that if we're shifting something like to the SU budget and stuff, you don't have to explain everything. But if it's significant, $5,000-$10,000 plus, it'd be nice to just kind of call out a tag on each budget to say shifted from SU budget or vice versa and stuff. So it's just really clear, and then I think we would have less questions coming into these meetings. I don't want to come to these meetings, wondering why, where'd the $100,000 go, having it show up as savings on this one, but then having us look at the SU budget and see this extra $100,000. Just if it was just called out right from the get-go, I think we'd have a lot less of this that's happening right now tonight.
And can I just add, Lou, too, you may think this is a not well-run meeting, but we're an 18-person board, and quite frankly, we rarely meet all together to discuss this kind of things openly in public, and it's very difficult because part of the things we can't discuss, we have to go into executive session. Then we need to come out to discuss the things that we're supposed to discuss in public session so that we can be transparent to everybody. And my feeling is we should have more board retreats so we can discuss these things at length as 18 people in one room so that we all understand what Mary Beth's goals are at length, so we don't keep people who have come to make public session comments for an hour while they sit there, so that we can talk about our pros and cons of the contracts and the people who are being hired or let go this year. It's not a perfect system. And finally, over the last 3 months, we found a little bit of synergy within this board in our conversations. And I just think that we've got to work together, and we've got to allow ourselves to talk sometimes, because I understand where some people are heard more than other people, but then we've got to do retreats on a monthly basis so that we can get this conversation out amongst all of us. Because everybody's opinion is valuable. It really is. Yours is valuable, Sam is valuable, but everybody's on a different level of understanding. Some of us come, like Jennifer, who's been doing budgets for the last 15 years, and she understands it line item by line item. And then there's other people who look at it going, holy crap, what is this? And what am I even approving? So our understanding, educationally wise, of half this stuff is so varied. So varied. So I don't know how to run the perfect meeting.
Hey, my only point was about process of running the board meeting. When we have a board member, who I like very much in his opinions, that responds to every single thing that's said, it breaks down the board process.
Okay.
Every member should be getting an opportunity to speak, following what we agreed to, I think was Robert's Rules of Order, right?
Yes.
And we're not following any version of that. That's my only point. And with a bigger board, it's more important, not less.
Okay.
I also believe when we started this subcommittee, that you're supposed to show up to the majority of the meetings, and I don't think I've seen you more than once in the last.
Okay, we're not going to switch going to each
That's the best you
other.
got.
Done.
We're done.
Okay. So I have heard, anybody else want to give us some input on the budget? We've got to schedule another budget meeting. We obviously are not ready to vote on this meeting, on this budget, and then we're going to have to discuss, and it's listed to vote on this SU
I would make
budget,
the motion to move both budgets to one budget meeting specifically.
Got one scheduled later, right?
No, but the
Budget meeting?
calendar,
Oh, I thought there was.
No. I don't think so.
It was mentioned in the.
Is it? I don't have that down. I don't think we did that.
That may be the presentation of the budget.
Can I get clarification from you, Jennifer?
I'm sorry?
Just a point of clarification. I'm not being asked to make any changes to the budget coming from this meeting. The investments that are in there, the reductions and additions that are in there. Or am I being asked, along with Mary Beth, to take something out.
I think we have heard, I think at this point, we're going to, some people will vote to support the budget or you won't vote to support it at the next meeting. But I think what we do need is, what's the format going to look like? I mean, if you make no changes to this, the substance of this, what are we going to see? I mean, this is not I can't vote on this.
No, I understand that. That was what Mary Beth wanted to bring in to give, at least to see if we could get an agreement on what the investments were. And this is the first time I've heard that the investments that are in the budget are the investments we're going to retain in the budget. And I've had many different communications on what to do with that.
Yeah.
So if those are in there, then I can work, and I'd be happy to work with Matt if he has the time, on how to present this in a manner that would be more understandable to board members. Because it is complicated, and I'd be happy to do it a better way. Some people like to see line item by line item. I know when we used to sit down, you went down line item, and you really like that.
I like that.
Others, when I have given a line item report, have said, what could I possibly do with this report? I need something else. So there's a broad range of understanding in there. We've got the numbers now. If we have the numbers now, it's a matter of presentation. And we'll spend the time to get that presentation put together.
Well, I think it's difficult because I think we have a
I don't
we
trust
have a
the
split
number.
finance committee, on support of this.
Can I just ask Jim
Yes.
why he doesn't trust the numbers? Why
Okay,
doesn't
so
he
you
trust
have
the
a
numbers?
supervisory union budget in front of me. This is what we're all put out in front of us. It's 8 pages. I go to page 7, once again, 7 of 8. Well, let's just pick Director of Finance salary. It says at fiscal year 19 budget, $105,373, going up to $112,750 for a $7,377 difference. We're telling teachers or whatever they're getting 2.5%. We're fighting them in contract talks. That's more than 5% raise there. But then we asked for, as a finance committee, we asked for a list of, a salary list for it. And I look over here and I go to the finance person and it tells me in 2020 that the budget, the pay is $109,378. So am I voting on 112 later on, or am I voting on 109 on the pay schedule?
And there is an explanation for that, and since it's my salary, I know what it is. I was provided with a contract. Hey, it is what it is. I was provided with a contract, and I was provided with an opportunity to have a conversation with the superintendent at the end of October, which didn't take place, to have my salary increased to $110,000, which I thought was appropriate based on research that was done. The 112 you're seeing here is a 2.5% increase from that 110, which when I put this number together back in October. What you saw today that I provided out was assuming that my salary as it currently stands goes up by 2.5%. That is an inconsistency, and I can set it either at the 112, depending on conversation with the superintendent, or I can set it at the 109 number, which would be the 2.5% number. Understanding that there's no guarantee that I will receive either one of those because my contract is negotiated in March. That's the reason for the inconsistency there, Jim. I'm sorry it happened, but there are some pieces that haven't been concluded on that. I know you raised on another one that talked about the superintendent's assistant. There are actually 2 different dollar amounts in there. There's not one person, it's 2. And I can show you what the components are that make up those 2 positions. You're also comparing fiscal 19 budget, and there are differences in salaries from the fiscal 19 budget to the fiscal 19 actual, for a number of different reasons, which I assume the board was involved in. All I did was take the numbers that I've been received of what people are being paid, and I've tried to put them in there correctly. In my case, it was a little more confusing, and if I've made that difficult or it makes you think that there's not validity to all the rest of the numbers, I'll take care of that.
Now, Mary Beth, may I ask you, because in years past, superintendents have come to us with what proposed increases are for the SU staff. So you did not do that though this year.
Well, the board voted a 2.5%.
Yes.
On that.
And so that is, all that's included in this SU is 2.5%?
There were some situations where we adjusted a roll and did a slightly larger increase because of that adjustment. And most of that happened after the board was voting. I read it by page. It was a relatively small number. But for the most part, what you saw there was 2.5. And in some unique situations where there was additional responsibilities or...
So that may be what we're seeing in that is that midway through the year, people were given additional responsibilities, additional money for those responsibilities, and now we're paying 2.5% on what that new number was?
That would be correct. And I can think of...
And again, Jennifer, the 2.5% is a placeholder. It's not a guarantee that anyone will receive it. It's just a placeholder, and if you'd like me to use a different number, I can use a different number on it.
No, I don't have a problem with that number. But if these numbers were passed by you, that like additional roles and additional, I just think that hadn't happened before, so I wasn't familiar with that.
When contracts were rewritten and established over the last year, some people's job descriptions changed and became more managerial or bigger, so there were increases that were larger to correct their salaries from the past.
Okay. But everybody in here is the placeholder is a 2.5% raise.
But I think maybe there were 3 people in that.
Yes, it was a very minimal.
Okay.
Yeah,
it was a minimal.
Okay. Sam?
Just a couple of things. Richard mentioned doing a different report, maybe with Matt, that was better, easier to understand, because I'm not too proud to say this doesn't make sense to me. This is my first year on the school board. I bet if I've been looking at a line by line budget for a long time, I'd be able to make sense, but this is huge. And as a first year, I would like something I could better understand, because I don't. Also, just because we were speaking about it a lot before the new Bruce studio, I'd be interested to know what the attendance of that is in comparison to other academic programs we are doing, and the cost in comparison to, you know, okay, we're spending this much on you, but we have this many kids attending while we only spend. I'd be curious to see, just because there was a lot of discussion about how much we are spending on it. Not that I don't think it's a good investment. I'd just be curious to know what that is.
Right. Just gonna rattle off some notes here real quick. So I already brought up the fact that the curriculum coordinator is on the SU budget. So everybody's looking at that. There's that. And then the buildings and grounds is under Richard's department on the budget. And that's why he has like a healthcare jump you'll see too. But I'm assuming that's because Joe's...
I'm sorry, Grace. Wait just a little bit.
Joe, his position and healthcare and stuff are all under Richard's department. So if anybody looks and sees that healthcare jump, I'm assuming that's why that's in there. But one thing that does stand out besides the positions shifted there, I didn't know if you still felt you needed $40,000 for conferences, because I know that I felt like maybe that was some of the one-time funds from last year.
That's the line item and centers that actually covers 3 different things. One is it covers if you recall last year there was a request for a communications director. What the board decided to do was keep $20,000 in the budget for communications. So that includes the $20,000 for communication. It includes the $10,000 annual fee for a national professional learning organization called EdLeader 21, and our membership within that national PLC, and then it covers the cost of a summer retreat for the leadership team. So it's under conferences, but those 3 things are clustered under that 40,000.
Okay. I mean, it would be good to have maybe like the dues and fees. I don't know. Some of that doesn't. It's just not conferences. And I guess then because we didn't vote to do the communications piece, what's that $20,000 being spent on?
Yeah, so that was used in conjunction with the Title IV money to pay for Battelle for Kids. Battelle for Kids was around, I want to say like 55 or so we had about 35 in Title IV, and then this is the additional 20 to get to the 55 for Battelle. Because Battelle does a lot with communications and communication toolkits and that type of thing, so that seemed like a logical place to pull it from. And I believe in August I shared that with the board that would be the recommended funding source.
And Mary Beth, so the elementary school curriculum coordinator is in this SU budget, but the high school curriculum coordinator is in the WCUD budget?
That is correct, and some of that I'm going to ask Richard to kind of talk about the logic behind that.
Okay.
It is because I believe that the high school dollars, given the breakout of Barnard from everything else, Barnard does pay their share of the high school, so I left as much of the high school specific expenses within the high school.
Okay.
On the elementary, there wasn't anywhere really to put it. What I could have done is put it into a district-wide within the MUD, and then allocated it 100% to elementary. But Barnard doesn't pay for any of the elementary within the MUD. So in order for Barnard to have some level of assessment, it was put into the SU.
Okay.
It's not perfect, Jennifer.
And this is, so it has salary for the elementary curriculum coordinator at 94.5 plus health insurance. Like this is just, this line item of 115,000 is just for that elementary curriculum coordinator, right?
That is
just
correct.
One person, okay. And just to get a ballpark, is that about that 115 total? Is that about what the high school or the high school curriculum coordinator costs?
I would say the high school curriculum coordinator is maybe $20,000 less than that. 15 to 20,000 less.
Shouldn't they be corrected?
In what way?
Why is that? I mean, they're two jobs. I mean, I just wonder, do we have I mean, I assume we've got the high school curriculum coordinator job description, and then there is an element, because we have a .4 now. Those are not, we're not budgeting the same amount of money for them?
Currently, we are looking to move a principal who is under a 2-year contract into that role, and that is the money she is contracted for.
If that is the case, there is a slight discrepancy between the local budget and this one, just as a side note. Small, but
I'm sorry.
There's a small
what?
discrepancy between the local budget and this one, if that amount is to be transferred from one to the other. Just as a side note, the amount on the Barnard budget is different than this number here for the same person.
What's the number on the Barnard budget?
It's off by just under $5,000, I believe. It's like
higher or lower?
120.
It's
Right.
120?
Assuming it was all the, if that's what we're going by. It's just a slightly different number.
Can I just suggest a process? I mean, we're talking about $5,000 line items for a $23 million budget.
Yep.
Maybe we can take this into...
Yes, we'll take into finance committee.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we will, we're still on the budget on F20, Y20, but I think we've talked quite a bit about the SU budget, and I feel we're not ready to vote on that either tonight. Does anybody feel like they're ready to vote on the SU budget tonight? We're going to come back with both of those in one
The bulk
one
of the SU
meeting.
budget,
I'm sorry.
we really should get input from Sherry, because the bulk of the SU budget is sorry, Sherry, I know you were sitting over there all sort of, but welcome in. The bulk of the SU budget now is the special education and the efforts that she's put in place for special education. So I think it would be worthy of the effort that she has put in and discussing what's gone on there.
I guess just in terms of process, it is 10 o'clock. We are going to call a special budget meeting where we can actually review, like, it would be great to have...
stated in the minutes,
yeah.
in the agenda.
it would be great to have a presentation on the comprehensive budget between SU and WCUD all together, of which Sherry is a huge chunk, right? Because it's all basically all this special ed. Like, it would be great to have that at the next meeting, rather than 10 o'clock at night.
Absolutely.
Well, I wasn't asking for it now, Matt. Sorry to give that impression.
If I can just talk procedurally, I'm looking at next weekend, the 22nd, 23rd, and I know from your perspective, Richard, you really are looking to have a voted budget by the 24th. So I would suggest either the 22nd or 23rd, if that works for people, or if there's a date, one rather than another on that.
Anybody have a preference?
22nd.
What was it?
The 22nd. I wrote 22nd.
22nd and 6th?
Is that too much? Is that?
Yeah, that's what I'm throwing out.
Yeah, 22nd at 6 o'clock.
What happened to?
Where is this going to be?
Will it be here or the SU office? Richard, here or the SU office?
For the finance or for the
January
finance?
22nd at 6 o'clock.
I think probably here.
Yeah, we'll do it here.
Okay.
Can you check, Rena? Thank you.
Okay.
The reason for the difference is the HRA is aggregated together at inside of the SU in a single line
Okay.
item. You're looking at
Do we want to? Yes.
$4,500
all right, we can do the
difference
reservation.
between the two. Otherwise,
Do you want to do that? Is that
You know,
important to
it's
get
not,
done?
it's not time sensitive and would have to reproduce WCSU, so let's just do it on 22nd. Gotcha.
And let's back up. Let's move policy to the next meeting. And do you need to establish the amount of tuition rate tonight? Or can we do that in the budget meeting?
Can you ask that question one more time, please?
We're going to do the tuition rate at the budget meeting next week.
Or do you need
Tuition
to
rate needs to go in tomorrow, and it just, the state has established January 15th. I'm not recommending a change.
And what's your recommendation is?
Recommendation is that we can hold it at $17,500 for the high school and $15,000 for the elementary school.
And I mean, so 17.5 is still, I mean, less than what our.
It is. We could.
Why?
Well, we can increase it, but we also have the ability at the end of the year, once the state calculates our allowable tuition rate, to go back and actually bill the individual districts for any of the difference between the two. So our choice is we could raise it up now, and if it's too high, we pay them back. Or if it's too low, we bill them. And
You can, after you announced your tuition rate, you then can bill for the.
You can. You can. The
Have
statute
we
allows.
Have we always done that?
We have never done that.
I didn't think so.
No,
That's
we
why
have
I'm
never
asking.
done that. I'm telling you what the statute allows. And we actually did receive an invoice this year from one of the districts who found that their allowable tuition was higher than what they had been charging. And it's allowable by statute. Now, again, if we would like to bring ourselves up closer to what the cost is per equalized pupil, so up closer to the 18,000.
My only thought is that, I mean.
We can do it that way also.
Well, it's just that you allow the towns to budget. I mean, then they know what they're going to be paying. And
We got them. We've had them for years from other districts, like
and
Rochester.
they bill you up to whatever's allowable.
They bill back. Yeah, we get bigger bills at the end of the year. Oh, you forgot this amount. Pay this now.
Okay.
So I mean, I would be comfortable if we wanted to increase the high school to 18,000, If we wanted to increase the elementary school to 15,005, it's closer to what our anticipated cost per equalized pupil is.
Make a motion now to go ahead with Richard's recommendation.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Wait, which is he recommending to
18.
keep it the same or to raise it?
15.5. 18 and 15.5.
18 and 15.5.
Any more discussion on it? All those in favor of the motion on the table, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes.
Glad we haven't done the Pittsfield budget yet.
Do we have anything else to discuss, Mary Beth?
Nope.
Can I have a motion on the table to adjourn? Move. Can I have a second? All those in favor?
Yep.
Night.